Welcome to the Standing Policy Committee on Property and Development for Friday, November 8th. My name is Sherry Rollins. I'm the chairperson. We have a new configuration to the Standing Policy Committee on Property and Development, and I'm grateful to Councillors Dobson, Councillor Duncan, and Councillor Allard, who spent the first part of the term with us, but joining us today are Councillors Eadie, Councillor Schreier, and Councillor Wyatt in the fullness of time, no doubt. Always we have Leah Cowan, Senior Committee Clerk, Hazel Boris, the Director of Planning, Property and Development, and a collection of other public service with us as the agenda warrants. I'm going to start the meeting by acknowledging that we're on Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota people, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis, and our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. And then because I worked for the TRC and because all of our hearts are with the Sinclair family, because we are Winnipeggers and we're in a period of mourning since the loss of Murray, I'd like to acknowledge too that it was sort of the advent of the TRC that we ended up really meditating on land and water acknowledgement, and my heart is just filled with gratitude for the legacy that Murray Sinclair has brought to the nation, and so I'll begin that way with the land and water acknowledgement and tying it to him and his family and the mourning that we're all in. I'll need a motion for to receive the minutes of the previous meeting. If Councillor Schreier is prepared to move.
I may do that despite the fact I wasn't on the committee, so moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That was carried unanimously. Yes, Councillor Eadie.
I was going to help you out and
I'd
like to move a motion to suspend the rules to hear from Councillors Gilroy and Councillors Dobson.
And if you could also for Mr. Boxtall, who is planning to join us on item number 9, and I'll just check in with the clerks if there's any more that you'd be prepared to move, Councillor Eadie. Any other? Okay.
Well, Mr. Boxtall, maybe that'll be a separate one from the public versus our comment.
Do it now if you'd like.
Yeah. So just this, and I'll move another motion for Mr. Boxtall.
Okay. All those in favor is on the first motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? And
I move a motion to suspend the rules to hear from Mr. Boxtall on what report is that?
Report 9.
Report 9.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And that was carried unanimously. We'll move into delegations.
Okay, so the first delegation is Councillor Gilroy from the Daniel McIntyre ward to be heard with respect to report 9.
Thank you, Councillor Rawlings. I think I'll just through the clerk. I'm just gonna it's easy to pass that through the clerk. I'm here in support of item number 9, and I guess this is my public apology to Marian Willis, who has done amazing work, and me and her have had really constructive conversations over the last year or so, and she's doing, I guess from my understanding in the past, I was told that the work she was doing was different than what she actually is doing. So it's kind of my apology because I took, I guess, rumors and innuendos, instead of really looking at the work she's doing. So she offered for me to come down, see the work that she's doing. I've been able to meet with people in their homes to see where they're living, because part of our arguments was where we were placing people over the years. And so she's really changed my mind on the work she's doing because I've seen it firsthand. She's actually housed a lot of my people. I've got to see where they're being housed, and I've got to be able to follow them through the years. So the work she's doing is really critical in terms of what we're seeing. Right now, I know up to October, she's housed 260 people. And I want to do a big shout out because Councillor Schreier, your ward might be one of the winners. Her work, even though she does, you know, she is east of the red, her primary work, she has helped out a little bit when needed in the area where I represent, and of course Councillor Rollins represents. So you know, the work we need to do in terms of addictions and mental health is far greater than what we have today. And she is really doing some of that work that is really needed. And I encourage you all to go down to St. Mary's. I've been able to go down to St. Mary's and see what they're doing. And it's a really unique, and it's everything that I've been telling what we need to do in terms of changing our shelter spaces and changing our mind. And when I'm talking with people that are unhoused, what I'm learning from is also to the ability to get away from the downtown, get away from the areas that is harming their addictions. And the ability to have another space is really critical. And that's what I think that space on St. Mary's provides. I'd like to see the lease extended longer than a few months. I think that they're doing critical work and the need is not going away. And in short order, they actually have beds there. People are staying there. They come from out of hospital. There's actually a 94-year-old woman that is staying there, and a lot of work is being done in order to keep people housed. And that's really critical. And so if we lose those spaces, I'm really afraid of what's going to happen. So we need all the shelter space that we can get. We have many different community partners that are out there doing amazing work. Main Street Project, Slow Mission, they're all doing amazing work, and we need to keep them. And we need to keep them doing the work because we're not gonna, this problem's not gonna be solved immediately. And it's gonna take some time. So we need the spots, and the only places where that is affordable for people to use is our city facilities. And so this city facility provides the supports that are needed to community from all over the city. And it's not just east of the main. And I want to talk about the kind of care that they get there is different than what we're seeing in different shelters, but there's also different people staying there. So I really encourage all of you to kind of go take a look at the space and really see what they're providing and what hopefully we can do kind of with other spaces that we have in our city, and really look at what we need to do to make sure that we're getting people housed, right? That are unsheltered right now. So I'm just wanting to say that I really support the work of Main Street Project. They've totally flipped my mind. Before I wasn't a supporter, me and Marianne have had some tough words at times, but when you put two strong-headed women in a room, you can come up with some really great stuff as well. So that's where we're at, hoping that you support her work. She's doing amazing, and I would love to answer any questions you might have.
Councilors, any questions?
No, thanks for your presentation. I know where you're coming from and glad you're here to explain it.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Guillory, you mentioned you know, right now this is a lease for a year.
Yeah.
You mentioned you'd like to see it beyond that.
Yeah.
Is that because then some of the questions I'll have for the public service is the burden on folks like Marion Willis, St. Boniface Street Links that are doing a lot of work, and then they're really burdened, like emergent work, right?
Yeah.
On our non-emergent encampment protocol. I mean, we pay them for the mobile services. They're one of only 3 that we pay as a city, including resource assistance for youth and Main Street Project. And we've done that for years since we funded it. That was really needed funding, arguably maybe more, and you've been the architect of the maybe more part in budget too. Most recently with the mindful cleanup and the social enterprise we're paying Siloam Mission to do in terms of the cleanups. Is it the burden of the administration that you think, from a year to year, the instability of an already unstable situation? Is that what you're thinking of when you're thinking the year to year lease?
Yeah, absolutely. Like funding for these groups are just the biggest barrier and space, right? Finding space is a big barrier and we have the space right now. And I know that I think there's a move for us to push for housing. And I think that I worry about that because right now, I feel that right now the emergent need is to deal with the crisis, and the people that we are trying to house cannot be housed immediately right away. They need a different kind of supports. So you can build all the housing you want, but it's really not going to deal with the addictions and mental health crisis, which if we can provide the right supports in these places, which I think StreetLinks is doing, we can help manage some of that. Right. And then not only to deal with some of the our people that are aging. Right. They're aging out of their homes and we don't have enough spaces to put them. And so they're another critical care that we're kind of forgetting about. And so when I'm seeing seniors that are not being taken care of, it really concerns me. Right. So we do need all different kinds of spaces for people to stay at. And what I'm seeing there with proper beds, where there's people there watching and monitoring things. This is a very safe space. I've been able to talk to some people that have gotten clean there, where they couldn't at other shelters because of the other addictions that were going on around them. So, so they provide a need that I think isn't there, and especially on that side of the city, which I think is where we need. That's why they wanted the addiction center that we built a few years back, that we gave the land for in St. James. They wanted it there because they didn't want them to be in the places where they, their friends and stuff were, where they could go back to their addiction, right? So that's what St. Mary's provides. It's a beautiful location, and I think everyone has that opportunity to heal also along the riverbank and stuff. So I am scared that with this housing that we're trying to push for, we could be selling this off. And of course, that is prime real estate. But right now the need is shelter space. And the city can't just find space for shelter, right? We don't have lots of spaces.
That's a really good point. And I think it's important to point out that the public service recommendation is a lease.
Yeah.
It is a lease. The public service also, I think, really rightly points out that there is not said here, but what I can point out is that there is a tension between, releasing property for longer term housing and then releasing property for transitional shelter and the emergent encampment that we have to, that I see as like the front end of any housing continuum. So, okay, we'll try to pay homage to your delegation today. Councillor Edie has.
I do have one question. I skimmed over this report. As just being on the committee, I've had four full meetings this week. But so when I was first reading this over, and we're looking at this particular property is one to build the needed housing that we have in the city. What would be your opinion? Construction would happen, it wouldn't be a space, but why can't we have the main floor operate with StreetLinks when a new building is built? And I don't know how many suites are being proposed here on St. Mary's, but it's probably over 100. And it'll be a mixed use, mixed type of housing in these new facilities that we're building. What's your opinion on that? Because we're like, this addiction thing and stuff, it's not going away immediately, like, it's not going away real fast.
I guess, Councillor Edie, I've really shifted my mind on the need for more housing. So I think those questions will let Main Street kind of, Street Links kind of answer those things. But for me, I'm shifting my mind because the people that I'm trying to house, I had this one gentleman, I was able to get him housed for the winter, but he was back on the street. And so I'm going back because actually Street Links has been able to get his money back from the federal government and stuff like that. So I'm trying to find him right now to see if I can get him housed for the winter, but they really need a different kind of housing. And even with
Well, they need support.
supportive housing, like it's gonna be, the low barrier that they need is very, very different. And so you're gonna need, so yes, that could happen if Street Links wants to kind of take that. But I'm also concerned that this is prime real estate and the city might just say like we can make a lot of money off of this property if we sell it to the highest bidder, right?
But
So I'd like to see it go to Street Links because we could maybe they could actually do some good housing there. But that would be a financial decision they would have to make.
here's the thing. The way to go in the future is you don't build a ghetto building. This is prime real estate. There's no doubt about it. With the right supports, the people who are struggling in life with addictions and so on, and they do need a place to live, they obviously need supports. You don't have to provide supportive housing to every unit in a over 100 unit building, but the supports are needed so that the social interaction with the people that live in the block, like I don't understand, and technically you would have a permanent place for St. Barnabas Street Links, and again the problem's not going away really soon. I don't know why we wouldn't look at having a permanent ability for St. Barnabas Street Links to continue doing what they're doing in a brand new apartment block.
Yeah, and you can talk to them about it. I know they're opening up a new space right now.
I'm not saying that St. Barnabas Street Links would build it because they don't have the wherewithal to do that kind of thing, but there's partnership. There are partnerships. Winnipeg Housing Rehab has partnered with that building on Toronto, right? So we built the place, but that whole apartment is all about supportive housing. But you can still do the same thing in a mix with a partnership and so on.
Yeah, we also need to make sure that we have sheltered space.
All
And
right.
if the city runs out of shelter, if we don't have space.
We don't have the shelter space now, so.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gilroy.
Thank you.
Councillor Dobson.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak here. This item number 4, what I'll be looking at is the accessible family change rooms for the Civic Center. And I think this is self-explanatory. The facility does not have accessible family change rooms. So if you're a family and you're attending the facility and you want to use the pool, you actually have to go into the lobby and use the handicap change room, and then proceed across the lobby and then go into the pool. So I don't think that's right. The high volume of seniors that use the pool, there's a reason for that. Most pools are rather cold. This one is warmer, much warmer. So seniors, being seniors, they prefer a warm pool. So that's the reason why so many seniors use it, and a lot of them will perhaps need accessible change rooms in the future if they don't already need them now. We currently are going through construction right away. It's a $13.2 million construction that's going to be happening next year or starting next month, perhaps. And if we were going to do a renovation, now's the best time. So there'd be the minimal amount of disruption. So if we were to include an accessible family change room in this construction season or during that $13 million expansion, that would make the most sense for this facility. Thank you.
Counselor Edie.
So while I was in a meeting somewhere, and we were talking about big capital projects, and there were issues with this facility renewal. And in those plans, there was accessible change washrooms considered in this. Where it got located wasn't really an issue for me. I didn't think to consider that, but so are you saying in that project that went over budget that they cut the accessible change rooms?
There is no accessible change rooms, family accessible change rooms for the pool at Civic Center.
Only at there is across the way though, right?
It's a washroom. It's not a change room.
Accessible washroom.
Wheelchair accessible washroom.
And that is a net new, based on the first phase of the project that was undertaken back in 2020. Yeah.
So the accessible washrooms there, so you're saying there was no accessible change room. I thought that came up though, maybe. So where do you propose that would go? The design and everything's done. Where do you propose, where is it being proposed that you could have that accessible change room directly associated with the pool?
Well, not being an engineer and not looking at the plans completely, if you go into the facility, the first door in that facility going towards the pool would be the men's change room. Then you would have a staff room, and then you would have the ladies' change room. Is perhaps you could put in that staff room. But that's whether the size is large enough, I don't know. The administration would have to look at that to determine if that would be a feasible location.
I heard issues, even though it's not touted that say the men's or the women's change room, that still has to be accessible too, right? The family change room is well, it's for multiple people, whatever, privacy or whatever. Anyway, okay.
May I ask a question? You mentioned you're interested in the change room. I always understood that there were a couple of phases to the St. James renovations, one that has taken place and more that are to be determined in the future, but some of which we do have in budget now. What are you proposing as the fiscal year for this, if you are? Because it is a multi-year build. There are things that were done, mostly the critical building systems that Councillor Edie was mentioning. What is your thoughts for budget, and was it part of something perhaps you indicated to the budget working group in the multi-year budget and you didn't see, or is this a net new request now? Because
it would be a net new request because I was not aware of it. A petition was brought forward from a lot of people, and they had pointed out that that facility does not have an accessible family room, and which is kind of embarrassing that we spend all this money on the facility, and those people with needing accessible change rooms don't have it. They can't use that facility.
Your point, however, and I understood their point because I had one person contact me about that. However, as a local councillor, this is your facility. This is your capital project that has a budget now and into the future and in the past. So with respect to that budget, sometimes this is sequencing. They did critical systems first. Are you suggesting that you want to disrupt other sequencing for that project? Or are you suggesting that you want a net add to budget? And if so, what is it?
What it boils down to is, first off, we don't know the cost to include an accessible family change room. The administration would have to look at that to find out the additional cost, whether it's feasible. And at that point, I would think that if we're going to do this, we should do it all at the same time. It just makes sense to add it right away. Something that we miss.
When you say right away, again, what are you by sequencing? Like, for instance, if in theory, the public service came and said, they see 500,000 in 2029 for design and another 3 million in 2030 for construction, what say you?
I would say that you would put it in when it makes the most sense in construction. You would not do it when you would try to make it work when you're shutting down the building and shutting down the pool. That's the time you would do it. You wouldn't do it any other time.
And if the public service says, we've got this, we have a sequence and a plan for St. James, which I believe they do, having been chair, when we got the significant money for St. James Community Center and we brought it up as a priority, and it has been treated as such ever since, you would say, great, counselors, keep going.
If it was in the plan, but from what I understand, it's not in the plan to do.
That's why I was asking you a matter of
Yeah.
timing. If I believe it is in the plan to do, it's just a matter of timing.
Okay.
Sorry, what's in
And
the,
council approval for
The
budget.
family chain, the family, accessible
chain.
family chain.
Okay, that's all my questions,
Madam-
Councillor Reid.
Madam Chairperson, in the discussions, like, again, you were talking about seniors, and the family accessible change room gives a added bigger capacity, but in the plans, that men's and women's change room that are there have to be accessible. And I believe they are. So is it not like until they continue with what Councilor Rollins is talking about? Don't you think that it's sufficient enough for the time being that there are accessible change rooms for men and women?
There are not family accessible change rooms. So if you were to go to a facility with your son or daughter of a different gender, you have to use the change room out in the lobby, because you cannot enter the family or the men's, or you cannot enter the ladies. You have to go use a family one. There is none there.
So there's no accessible door to get into the men's, for example?
You can't go in the men's if you're a mom bringing in your perhaps son. You can't go in them.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Or if you're a dad bringing in your daughter,
The
you can't do
gender
that.
identity issue, okay.
Yes, it
So
has.
really what we're talking about is we're not talking about seniors, we're talking about gender identification, because you presented this whole thing about seniors, but
It's both.
Councilor Dobson, have you seen the new accessible entrance and the washrooms? St. James?
I've been to St. James. The issue is it's not family.
Yes, I was just wondering if you've seen the improvements. This is a major capital project,
Mhm.
picking up our ISIP grants. And it's going, I think, at a pace of improvement each and every time. Are you satisfied with the improvements, the new accessible arena entrance, the accessible washrooms in the lobby, the new universal toilet room? You're happy with those so far?
Yes. But the universal, I call that the handicap washroom in the lobby.
The universal toilet room, yeah?
Yeah.
Mhm.
But
The accessible
my
programming
apologies.
spaces on the second floor, they're also pretty great and snazzy. You like those too?
Sure.
Yeah. So the second phase of work, you got some confidence in?
Yes.
Okay. Good.
My apologies for for stressing too much on the seniors, but ultimately we need a family change room,
Okay,
which could be used by seniors too.
not denying that, but
okay. Well,
the future plans, right?
Okay, well, that's all the questions I think the committee has, unless anyone else has any questions.
Chair Rowlands, you said it was your understanding that there was plans to have a family accessible, chicken room?
You know, yeah, I think that this is going on in 3 phases, and the first phase was a very significant phase that absolutely in any major construction project, you choose, you know, life safety systems of a building first kind of thing. And there's a second scope of work that has Canada Infrastructure Program budget, and is taking into account. That's why I was asking about sequencing and perhaps change of scope to the local councillor. That's a significant ask at this stage, given how much work has been put into the St. James Civic Center. I appreciate, you know, because I had inquiry about the accessible, you know, washroom and about sequencing, but you know, as someone who has several community centers that doesn't have this type of financing, attention, and sequencing, you know, I do believe it's coming because the money is there. And so the public service will be here to update committee on that. There has been in each and every phase of construction accessible programming spaces, accessible washrooms, a whole new accessible lobby. So I don't think that tide's going to change. There is a second and a third scope of work. And so that's why I was asking the councillor, do you want to change the sequence, timing of the money or more? And so I heard no, but there has to be this built in. I see when it's built in, but we'll get that from the public service, and we'll, you know, you'll be back.
Yeah.
Because Councillor Dobson sat on this committee, and he's here the first available opportunity. I don't believe he's going to leave us. I don't believe he'll leave us, you guys. So thanks for today, and I'll for sure give you an email.
Thank you.
So
Summary.
it sounds to me like it'll be easy, from what I hear, it'll be easy for the administration to fulfill Councillor Dobson's motion to report back on accessible family changes.
I'm going to talk to them about that, but I don't think it's next year.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
go to the next delegation.
Sure. The next delegation is Marion Willis to be heard with respect to report 9. Marion is not with us in the Zoom meeting just yet, so perhaps
We'll
the
go
committee-
back to her when she's available, if she comes in, okay?
All right, so we'll move on to David Grant, who's speaking in support of report 1 and in opposition to reports 2, 3, 5, 9, and 17. David is joining us via Zoom today.
Morning.
Morning, thank you. The comment on signage at City Hall, this is a good thing. Making the public feel more welcome is also good. Good signs will reduce the amount of employee time wasted telling visitors where to go, because that's what you have to do if you go into the north building. Quite often we have to ask directions. Anyway, I would contrast what you're hoping to do here with what happens in the concourse at Portage and Main, where there's lots of signage, but the signage is only directing you toward a business, not toward the place you want to go. So the purpose that the person reading the sign wants to make of it is very important. It's not just putting up a sign, but having it effective. So I'm sure that this will be done very well. And thank you for bringing this item forward. Verbal report on selling property. Once again, it's just verbal. Staff and the rules are keeping the public and the SPC, you folks, in the dark by not publishing even a short summary report beforehand. On topic 3, info delayed on the Portage and Main work. The idea of waiting another 180 days to begin to understand these aspects of the property is strongly contraindicated in the context of the city's current schedule. Is there no preliminary information that could be offered on these topics? Absent from this topic is a link to the comparison by a professional engineer of the various means of mitigating the concourse ceiling leakage. With this critical step missed, it is a new level of governance failure to commit to spending tens of millions of taxpayer dollars and perhaps wasting thousands of hours of traveler time without a full report on the alternatives. Topic 5, employment opportunity. Staff are asking for a delay. We can hope that staff will make use of the delay by providing clarity by rewording this agenda item. That number of days should be sufficient of delay. Nowhere in the agenda is there an explanation of what this is all about, and you can't find it easily with a search. Why is keeping residents in the dark important? Topic 9, 604 St. Mary's. It is sad that this tenancy ends in our coldest season. Whatever is done today by you folks and by staff, the next tenancy period should end closer to mid-year. I agree with staff who say that you must follow the rules. As our previous councillor delegation pointed out, we need more home care capacity as folks age out of conventional housing and with our current housing shortage. City Hall should not stand in the way of those who want to build that care home capacity. Another aspect, since the clients in some cases are suffering from health emergencies, the clients for 604, and since this demographic is growing fast, perhaps you should ask the mayor to write to the minister about increasing Manitoba's capacity to treat those suffering from drug abuse and those trying to escape from their addictions. Our capacity to begin treatment is woefully inadequate. This would be a more caring and humane solution than simply multiplying the number of sufferers that we can keep out of the cold. Cold weather is only one aspect of the discomfort and suffering of these people. Moving on to a completely different topic, number 17, bike parking rules. Requiring minimum on-site car parking spots can minimize the harm done to an established community, especially one with almost no parking spaces, by a new building. Car parking is well understood. Bike parking, on the other hand, is not a standard feature. Providing a number of bike-accessible storage spaces can be of value for most tenants, whether these boxes hold summer toys or bikes. A sealed box can securely hold a bike. Along the old BRT line, there were installed lockable steel boxes for bikes right next to the bus station. A bike parked in an open space cannot be protected from vandals and thieves. My first good bike was stolen from outside the library, and I've been concerned about it since. You should leave decisions on providing such features to the landlord. If demand warrants for a rack or an enclosed box, they can be a recommended option. Certainly codes and city guidance can recommend that sealed boxes be provided at grade level for the tenants. Needs and situations are so varied that I believe that neither should be spelled out in law, because a situation in an area of high crime area is very different from one in a well-protected street. Anyway, I'll let you get back to your meeting, but if you have any questions, I'd be free to answer. Thank you.
Thank you for your time this morning.
I do have a question regarding report number 9. Thanks, Mr. Grant, for your insights on this. And excuse me, you went through a number of issues as you're apt to do. And in terms of report number 9, read the request to enter a consecutive short-term use agreement with St. Boniface Street Links Incorporated at 604 St. Mary's Road. Okay, once again, what is your concern about this?
Oh, primarily that as was pointed out by the people wanting the tenancy to be extended, that it ends in not a convenient time of year. That the end of November is when people need, every day, they need that warm space. So my suggestion is that whenever tenancy is arranged, I'm hoping it will be extended, but when it's extended, that the next tenancy will end closer to mid-year. Like June would be a great time, because then if there's dithering on having to sell the building and move the space to somewhere else, then it can be done in summer more easily than at the end of November. So that was my concern with that one. The other comments were ones that were inspired to me by the councillor's presentation in delegation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and the final delegation is John Boxstall to be heard with respect to report 9. I don't believe John is with us in the gallery and not with us via Zoom.
Okay,
So I
and
think
Marion Willis, can we check back on Marion Willis?
she is not in the Zoom meeting.
Okay, well, maybe they like what they've heard so far, so, and in the media, so we'll continue on. Our first, report is wayfinding signage at City Hall.
Madam Chairperson, do we know where
Yes, I got.
we got an
word
update from Councilor Wyatt?
Yes, I have, I do have word from Councilor Wyatt, Councilor Edie.
And he's
Eh,
far away or?
I think I can send you an email if you'd like, but we're live on camera, so it's
Oh, I see,
private,
okay. All right. Thank you.
information to
All
share. Okay,
All right.
wayfinding City Hall, Brad Erickson, Jeff Patton, welcome to the table.
Thank you very much, councillors. So we're requested to report back to this committee with wayfinding signage. So contained in the report and to stay within budget that's been allocated to us for the new courtyard signage. So we've updated the courtyard signage and class estimate. We've provided a location and a mock-up for the sign. That's just another highlight. We're planning for illumination, but illumination is not in the budget right now, just in terms of the available budget, but we'll make provisions for the future. And we'll see how work proceeds to see if we can incorporate lighting into the facility, into the new signage, but it'll meet all the City of Winnipeg sign standards. We're open to any questions. I think we've also got Jen Hansel online in Zoom for any specific questions as well.
Councilor Edie.
There's a couple of images there. Can you help me out? Where's the signage actually in the courtyard being located?
So it's in the courtyard. Maybe I'll defer to Jen Hansel to maybe describe this to you. It's
I'm familiar with the layout
Yep.
of the thing, but I just couldn't see the pictures.
Yep. Jen, if you could maybe
Yep.
provide some description. Yep.
The sign is located in the courtyard, sort of off the path of travel, right where the trees begin. We didn't want it right on the path of travel, so it's sort of right against the trees if you're walking towards the administration building.
Right, so there's kind of like the trees are around kind of a aisleway that takes you to the front door of the admin building. So you're just saying it's just off to the side, high enough to be visible as you come up the ramps or stairs into the courtyard?
Yep, it's right there, sort of at the start. If you're making your way towards the admin building, it is a large sign. It's 5 foot 3 feet tall, and this is so that it has the sight lines, and that the braille it has English, French, and Braille on it. So Braille is at the right height to be read. It's double-sided so that people are seeing it both from King Street and Main Street when they're coming into the courtyards. You don't have to be right in the courtyard to see it. You should be able to see it as you approach the courtyard from either side.
So, I guess for Central, you're doing the detail on this. LED lighting is used for most signs. Did you look at what the cost would be for us? Well, might be a problem in the winter, but did you look at a solar option for lighting of the sign?
We didn't look at a solar option. We just looked at sort of the standard electrical. And we're not going to be able to, well, it depends how procurement goes. We don't think we can do that right off the hop. But we are going to build it so it can be easily illuminated when we're ready. But we were sort of going with standard electrical.
So that would be pretty expensive then, in that there's no immediate electrical underground in that area, is there?
There is actually, there's little, the courtyard has some little sort of surface lighting in it right now when you walk there. So there is electrical present that we could tie into.
All right. So, well,
Counselor Shire?
actually, I'll let.
It was mentioned, staying within a budget. Are there budget constraints or are there, budgetary options in terms of offering sufficient signage? What's the difference?
Just, yeah, I'll answer that, Councillor Schreier. So council was allocated $35,000 to this, and we were directed to stay within that budget.
Okay. If we were to stay in that budget, how would the signage change? Like, is there, is some sort of limitation to signage?
I don't know if the sign would change too much from its current, we would probably include electrical illumination. Jen, any other comments on that?
No, I don't think the sign would change much. We accomplished everything we wanted to. It's fully accessible. It's WADS compliant. You know, we think it's a good fit. It's the materials that we want to use fit with the materials that are already there and the other signs that are already there. So we think it fits well. It was just the electrical that we couldn't squeeze in, but we may still be able to do that just depending how procurement goes.
Thank you.
Counselor Edie, you have another question?
I had one more question. So essentially, this is wayfinding. Anyway, examining the lighting. I'm just wondering out loud. We close at 4:30. So this wayfinding is more essential for the operating hours of both buildings, I guess. So is that going to be taken into consideration? Has that been taken into consideration?
I think, Jen?
Yeah, we did. Like I said, we do see the need to have it lit, especially, you know, in the winter when it's not always light by 8 a.m. or like you say, by 4:30, light is starting to fade. So it is a priority that we can, like, we're going to build the sign so it can be lit down the road if we can't do it now. So we did consider that, and it is top of mind.
All right. My only question is, you get approval today from Property and Development. You move on anticipating a timeline. Is it fair? Is it a fair question? And number one, if it's not, don't answer it. But, you know, do you have a timeline in mind for when we could see the sign?
Jen, in terms of procurement?
I think probably, you know, I don't want to promise and not be able to deliver. So maybe 6 months. I'm a little leery of some of the work happening. You know, it might be cheaper for us to do some of the underground work and the foundation work because this does need piles, right? So you might be starting it closer to spring if pricing is more favorable that way.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Do we have a mover, councillors? Councillor Edie?
Oh,
You wish to move?
I'm gonna move the recommendation of the public service on the wayfinding for the,
Excellent. All those in favor?
I,
And councillors, just so you're aware, the critical path states that this item goes to council, but this committee does have jurisdiction over the matter, so it will be approved at this committee.
Perfect. That's just the way you want it. All right. We'll move on to the verbal report on the sale of city-owned buildings to not-for-profit tenants, item number 2.
For to Gord, I think is going to join us and
And then we'll queue up for item number 3, which is the Portage and Main intersection that everybody else stay for. And inclusion of accessible family changing rooms. I don't know if you can let community services if they're with, like, if anyone else is with us. Okay, Gord Chapel.
Yeah, so last time the matter was before the committee, we advised there was 12 potential tenants interested in purchasing the building they're located in. We since had the chance to further circulate those buildings, and there were some civic objections to the sale of some of those properties, which were expected. We do have 4 tenants where a sale is still possible. 3 daycares in the school that we have leased. So we're continuing to explore those sales. Were able to sell those properties that would represent a 5% reduction to our portfolio. And the other 40 tenants that we did not contact, and the other tenants, the handful of tenants that did not respond to the initial circulation, we'll continue to work with them to see if there's other options there to see if we can further reduce the portfolio. But as a first step, this is good for the city. We can put potentially the hands in the buildings of the occupants for assets that are not required for city purposes, and potentially reduces the city's infrastructure deficit related to our lease portfolio.
To your what portfolio?
The lease portfolio, the rental portfolio.
Any questions, councilors? Councilor Eby?
I noted one daycare was picking up the option to purchase in my ward. Is that the only one?
The addresses were, and sorry, I don't know the exact boundaries of each ward.
Well, one is
I
in
think
mine, Salter.
491 Salter would be the one of yours. Yeah, and then 669 St. Matthews, which Gilroy, 689 Oliverstone, again, Councillor Gilroy, and then the 410 to celebrate the school, which is in the Councillor Schreier's ward, I believe.
Right. Ooh. Okay. And you said there's to contact the other 40. In the past number of years ago, I don't know why we actually, our curator at Seven Oaks House Museum was asked if the board wanted to buy it, but the board's all appointed by the city of Winnipeg. So you've taken them off the list, for example. I think Bleak House said no.
I believe we didn't circulate to any of the museums for essentially the reason that, in part of the reason you mentioned.
Well, there was an original, I'm talking.
Several years back.
I'm talking way back.
Okay, yeah, that's possible.
When this whole concept of putting money into okay. Anyway, I just know that. Anyway, we'll continue to hear updates, I think, Madam Speaker, on this. So.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Councillor Wyatt.
Yeah, first of all, look forward to working with all of you on the committee.
Thank you.
And I think I speak for all our new councillors that we'll need your guidance and support as we go forward. So could I just on this report, Mr. Chappell, this is related to the report that came forward about 6 months ago, is that right? With all the different properties that we were potentially declaring surplus and negotiating. Some said yes, some said no. You had the yes column, no column. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And I just want to know, was there an analysis done at the time pertaining to properties that are serviced, i.e., where I'm going with this is I'm just wondering, my only concern was when I saw the report, which I had some concerns about, which a couple of ones in my own ward, but more importantly, and I spoke to that, I think, at the time, possibly at this committee, but I had other concerns that I didn't raise because I'm looking on the committee, or questions, I guess, and that now that I'm on the committee, I'll ask them. The purpose, I understand, is to remove the city from future liabilities of properties that we own right now, potentially. Correct. And I know we're often very eager to do that, and that makes sense as well. At the same time, some of these properties have fairly substantial lands attached to them, not just buildings. And from what I was able to gather, some of the properties are serviced, from what I could see, in terms of land servicing, water, sewer. They have full level municipal services. And I guess one of the thoughts I had was there an analysis done to the potential for their development ability that we would be losing as a city, leverage on the ability to develop if they were to acquire this outright, for example, not a lease, but outright. But
that we would lose the ability and the options on the land for development, whether it be for housing. Housing would be the first thing in a lot of these neighborhoods, but maybe other options. That would cost the city or potentially lose the opportunity for the city in the long run. Was that analysis done?
So the approach we took was rather than circulate all 80 locations to the city departments before the report, which would have been a pretty significant undertaking, and realizing that many of these sites immediately would have been objections to, we reached out to the tenants first to find out their interest, to see whether there's something worth pursuing there.
Right.
And then once we got that response, then we can go back to the city departments. So that's how we ended up having 8 objections from city departments for reasons that potentially you're noting here. In a lot of cases, it's parkland that was part of that there was no desire to dispose of any of that. In another case, water and waste, that's from infrastructure, that they had no desire to let go. So as we would circulate these properties, that's where that discussion would come out. Housing office, parks, community services may all state that we need this for the future library or whatever the case is. And that analysis would be done subsequent to the tenant indicating their interest.
But we don't really have an economic development arm or a housing arm as such that would, as a department or a division even, that would wade in on that side of it, like water and waste would, like transit, like community services, libraries. My concern is that the economic benefit to the city of developing these lands in tandem. I guess I'll ask you this: is there any opportunity through the sale of the lands to still be able to place a caveat or entertaining a lease instead, whereby we as a city would not lose the option for future development opportunities on these properties? And I guess where I'm going with this too is you have a lot of not-for-profits that are operating these facilities, whereby it could be a win-win for them as well. They would get a new facility, main floor. We're seeing this today where the city announced $5 million for Winnipeg Housing Rehabilitation Corporation on Transcona Boulevard. The main floor, they have the opportunity to do housing for not-for-profits and themselves, above social housing, affordable housing. This is where I'm going with this, I guess. Is there an opportunity to do that here?
Yeah, so the report, and so I don't have it in front of me, but it did discuss having the city's option to take back the land if the nonprofit use didn't.
Yeah, if it didn't work out.
Right.
Right.
So
Yeah, I understand.
we want to protect ourselves against a building being flipped. In the case of the 4 properties I'm talking about, there's virtually no surplus land to these facilities. It's basically building and parking. I think it's a different conversation that we mentioned if we get into green spaces or undeveloped areas that is surplus.
Yeah, yeah. I look at, for example, I know 875 McMeans East, large property, Transcona Natural daycare operate there. Great opportunity to do something there for housing where they are on the main floor, but they would not spearhead it. We would probably have to spearhead it like any other property. Anyway, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further questions?
In terms of 410, the Salaberry, I used LDR funds to fix the riverbank at 404 to Salaberry, right to the west. And in that process, it was explained to me that construction had to use the parking lot at 410. And in the process, damage was done to the parking lot, tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage. Is that taken into consideration when negotiating with the tenants at 410? The state of the parking lot and the cost of fixing the parking lot due to the construction or due to the riverbank mitigation next door.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to the point with them in terms of negotiations. I think we're still trying to figure out what the boundary of that sale is going to look like, because there was a lift station on site and some other types. So yeah, we'll get to that once we sort of understand what it is that we potentially can sell.
Okay. I'll move that we receive this. I move the report to council. The verbal report. Yeah.
Thank you very much. All those in favor?
Aye.
That was carried unanimously. We'll move on to Portage and Main intersection at grade opening and the decommissioning of the concourse. Would someone move an extension?
I'll
That's
move it,
what's
I'll
on here.
move that 180-day extension be granted for the following report.
Is that what they're asking? Is
That's
the
correct.
intention?
Yeah,
Councilors probably wish to hear a bit of discussion from
not really.
the public service. If not, we'll move on.
Yeah.
I'll
I don't
call the
want,
question
unless
now.
my colleague did.
Well, I just wanted to ask one question, that's all.
Councilor, go ahead, Councilor Edie.
Well, there's negotiation and discussion, so I appreciate that, and that does take a fair amount of time, given the structure of who has what part, and so on and so forth. But I just wanted to confirm that through this consultation, it actually hasn't, this is not saying this is the final decision that the underground's gonna be filled in.
So Counselor, well, I can answer that. So no, there's been no direction from council to decommission. We're looking at the cost to decommission. So we are, this work is going to confirm the estimate that was given before, this $20 to $50 million estimate to decommission the concourse and complete consultation, preserve the existing public art that exists in the concourse.
Yeah.
So this work, we're going to confirm with the consultant the plans to decommission and then present those costs to council, and then council make a determination on the future of the concourse.
So there's no consultation with people the stakeholders who live downtown and use the underground in the winter?
There will be consultation with stakeholders, Councillor, as part of this work. Yes.
So that general users, like people with wheelchairs don't use it, but there's a lot of seniors in the winter who would probably appreciate staying on. Okay, so, all right, so moved.
Go ahead, Councilor Shire, I see you.
Yeah, thank you. So in order to make council to make a determination on the future of the concourse, it's also a function of course, to make a decision, the cost of repairing the concourse. Is that going to be part of the report for us to be able to make a decision on the future?
So council already has a report, a very detailed report from Stantec on one option to repair the concourse. So that's the $100 million 5-year disruption option that for the repair of the waterproofing membrane at the concourse. This work will make sure there isn't any other options because that option was a dig and be in close proximity to dig and replace the membrane. So if Brad has any additional commentary on it, but we're certainly going to look at other options if some are presented. So.
Last question. Sorry, I don't mean to, I know we got a lot of other reports. So I'm now sitting on Public Works. So yesterday, the standing committee voted to increase the budget. There's a lot of risk involved with opening up the top, and that's main reason why there's extra cost. But there was a discussion that, you know, in removing the barriers and whatever, and when you get underneath, they have to raise actually the sidewalk at the Métis Federation's building. Part of that risk that they mentioned was the membrane. Like they might have to do some repairs to the membrane in order to facilitate, for example, on the Métis Federation side, the membrane or wherever. That was never taken into consideration when the 100 million 5-year option came up, right?
So, yeah, no, I think that was certainly, you know, there was a lot of discussion around. So yes, I'm aware with Public Works scope of work, There will be some limited work while they're there to ensure that the at-grade opening doesn't exacerbate the situation in the concourse right now. So there'll be some limited work. There's a reconfiguration at the front of the Manitoba Métis Federation building, the reconfiguration of the stairway to permit the at-grade crossing and pedestrian flow through the area. So modifications are being done to that. And then, removing all those accesses will be all part of our decommissioning study, and the cost will be presented to council at that point.
I'm just saying some of that water membrane, I predict that it will need repair in order to facilitate the opening. But anyway, I digress. Thank you, ma'am.
No, I appreciate that. That's not a digression to me. That's.
Now they got it, asking, I apologize, I just heard you. Thank you. Jeff, was there anything else that's done on the economic impact on the shops under in Winnipeg Square, the potential loss of the concourse tied to that report, engineering report? Or was it economic? And then maybe more of a water and waste, real estate question I'm asking.
Could be, like, I'll defer maybe to Gord in terms of the number of tenants that are there, but it's very limited in terms of.
No, I'm not talking about in the concourse.
Yep.
I'm talking about in Winnipeg Square. Yeah, the economic impact potentially on the issue of the.
Real estate hasn't involved in anything to do.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you. I'll move the report.
The extension of 180 days that it be granted is moved by Councillor Wyatt. Good discussion, really important to note, I think, for those in the downtown, including the businesses in the concourse, that when council said there is no timeline and nothing's being done right now, that's stabilizing communications, and that is continuing because here we need a 180-day extension. So nothing is moving fast with respect to the concourse. However, council is making moves to open Portage and Main at grade. Good news. Yesterday, thank you, Councillor Edie, for being on
Actually, I
Public
voted
Works.
against it.
Well,
Sorry.
That's-
wasn't there.
I accept the apology. Do better next time. I'm joking. So moved by Councillor Riley. I'll call the question before I get into trouble. All those in favor? Any opposed? That was carried unanimously. Moving to inclusion of accessible family changing rooms in St. James Civic Center.
I move referral to the 2025 budget for discussion.
Certainly, that is a possibility with this one. Would councillors like to hear from administration though? And I certainly am a councillor on the committee that would like to.
Okay.
With respect to phase 1, 2, 3 of the project, that was the subject of questions. Councillor Dobson's here. I think it's important to have some words in the record. So Councillor Dobson doesn't feel like he wastes his time in delegation. Thank you very much for joining us.
So yeah, just joining us, Sandra Swansky from Community Services. Also Brad's here to continue discussion. The work is being undertaken by the MA Forces. So maybe Sandra, you want to address the change room discussion, so.
Thank you, councillors. I get to see Councillor Edie twice this week, so it's been a good week. So further to St. James Civic Center, St. James Civic Center was built in 1967, and we've been working on renewing that facility for a number of years. The original feasibility studies and push to reinvest in the facility actually go back quite a considerable time. Prior to 2020, the facility had really seen quite limited investment. Many of the building systems were original to the building, and it had reached the end of their life. So further work and study was done to look at what we could do to renew the facility, bring it up to current standards, address the accessibility issues which were prevalent throughout all areas of the building. And what happened was a capital feasibility study was developed. It had considerable costs, and in order to move forward with the project, there was a decision made to break the project into phases. So there were 3 main pieces of work that were identified. The first being the end-of-life building systems and the life safety systems. So a lot of work happened between 2020 and 2022 to address those components. Along the way, we also addressed accessibility challenges within the lobby and the arena to ensure that it was an accessible space that people could reach. So that work was completed in 2022 at $10.1 million budget. Since then, we have been proceeding with the second scope of work, which is focused on replacing some of the programmatic space that was lost originally. The original building had programmatic space in the second floor and the basement, but no elevator. So we reprioritized the second floor space to become mechanical electrical space in the first phase, which reduced the cost of running the lines. But it meant that the building really had a shortage of programming space. So the current expansion that is out to tender, fingers crossed that we come in where we want to be, includes renovations to the existing hall, renovations to the existing washrooms to bring them up to accessible standards of today. We're also replacing the kitchen, which is original and quite dated, not fully accessible. So a new kitchen will go in. And we're building new programmatic space that will be grade level, fully accessible with hearing loops to replace the space that was lost. We're also creating administrative space for St. James 55 Plus, who will be relocating to the facility. So Councillor Dobson's comment about the seniors is very accurate. Will absolutely be increased focus and interest on the programmatic spaces and accessibility of the building overall. So the third scope of work that has not yet been undertaken revolves around the pool. So it was always identified that the pool and the change rooms would be sort of the last piece that we needed to look at. The intention was to look at them together because there are some significant challenges to upgrading the gendered change rooms. They're undersized and it will be tricky to make them fully accessible. So we have looked at that. We've worked with the architectural team that's currently on the project. They have come up with a schematic design for us and a class 3 cost estimate. The plan is actually to extend out the west side of the building and create accessible change rooms that can access directly onto the pool. The challenge is it is currently unfunded. So from a departmental perspective, we do view this as a priority. It has been on our unfunded list for a couple of years now. And we would be happy to undertake the work at whatever point council was willing to fund it. So that's kind of where it sits at the moment. We do have a plan. We do have some costing. It's just in need of budget.
And just one clarifying statement as well, just that the current tender for the expansion closes November 19th. And we'll be proceeding to award following that closing and bid evaluation.
1 second, Ron.
Okay,
I had
so
extensive
Councillor,
discussions with
councillors have questions. I'm just going to check in with administration that you're completed your initial presentation. Councillor Wyatt had his hand up and then Councillor Edie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The total budget approved to date.
10 million was approved for the 10.1 for the first phase and 17 for the current work that's out to tender, and that is funded through ISO.
So a total of 27.1 million. Quite significant. Why, if I may ask, I always am a believer of going into a capital project. Brad, we would know this, going into a capital project, funding it once and moving on to our next challenge versus kind of, death by 1,000 cuts, so to speak. Why did we not opt to do that here?
So it predates my time with the Asset Management Office, but I do understand that originally the full cost of the project was brought forward for consideration and discussion. And
Council decided not to.
It seemed to be beyond means.
I see. Okay, and has there been an estimate given to the said expansion, the pools that you referred to, with the addition to the building to be able to accommodate the washrooms? Was there an estimate given on that budget? Do you have a number?
I do have a number. So we have identified that we need $500,000 and we put it out in 2029 because that is what we can accommodate within our balance submission. And we need a further $3 million in 2030.
3 million, sorry, 500,000 and 3 million, so it's 3.5?
And we've asked for 2.5 and ideally in 2031.
Okay, and
So
another
really
2.
our total budget is just under 6 million to do the work. And that would involve building new change rooms and renovating the existing gendered change rooms.
Are you renovating?
The existing gendered change rooms,
Okay,
because we need both for the capacity of.
I understand. Water closets, building code. I lived it with the expansion of the transport conifer. So So then I guess the question I have is, 6 million will give you just washrooms at that point
So full-on change rooms.
and change rooms. So
Yes.
renovated,
Which,
renovated change rooms.
Yep, we would build an expansion to the west
Okay.
of the current pool.
And the life expectancy, has there been analysis done on the life expectancy of the indoor pool at this point?
Well, I will say that the overall building, coming into this renewal project had really exceeded its useful life. We had extended well past its 50 years. And as you see, we've put considerable money into it. We have assessed the pool tank. There is some renewal work that we would like to do on the pool, but there's nothing that was identified in the building condition assessment.
Is the renewal work needed on the pool something that is strongly advisable, given the investments made to date and being proposed?
I think it's work that was viewed as long-term in the building condition assessment, mostly
It doesn't
related to
jeopard-
the underside of the deck.
Okay, is there any structural issues, or I get what I'm looking at this, is there any issues? I would hate to see us make these investments, including the ones that you're proposing in the future, and then all of a sudden the pool, right? I guess I want to make sure that the tank is solid going
The
forward.
tank is solid. We are seeing in all of our pools that the membranes and the tile needs to be redone.
I see.
They're all reaching.
So it's more cosmetic than structural.
They're important because if you don't replace the membrane and the tile, then the water infiltrates into the concrete,
And then you have,
corrodes, yes, and then you have a problem. So
And-
it is timely maintenance. So
do we have, so to me, that's probably a higher priority in some ways. Yeah, what would be, has there been an estimate given on that number, on that cost?
there is a building condition assessment. I don't know that we ran it through all of the city's basis of estimate and what that number would be. We'd have to put that.
And that would be, I think, very good to have, considering budget uncertainty. I think it all should be done at the same time. Well, and then the final question I have, Madam Chair, is, when I was doing the expansion, when we were doing the Transcona Aquatic Park, I pushed hard internally for, non-gender specific washrooms. At the time, it was relatively a new thing that was taking place, at least in our city at that time. They were already moving on that in Toronto and other places. Is that something that the department has been prepared to do, or is more prepared to do now? What is the thought? What are your thoughts on that?
So St. James Civic Center, the washrooms that were done in 2020 are non-gender.
Okay. Okay, very good. Yeah, I couldn't get them in through the Transcona Aquatic Park in 2015, 14. Anyway, okay. All right.
Expansion also.
Councillor Wyatt seems to be willing to move budget referral of this project. Jumping off into what's happening next, which, you know, many folks would argue that have unrenovated community centers, that, you know, the second scope of work is a bit of an embarrassment of riches, $17 million. And so I was asking the councillor quite serious questions, like, do you dispute the sequencing or the priorities of events that have happened? Because there is only so many available funds. Funds have been 10 million funded to this community center to do accessibility upgrades that are wonderful. The second scope and the ISIP grant is really dedicated to, you know, also wonderful things, community kitchen and auditorium and more. So including some more accessible program rooms and that is key to the groups that use it. We go to St. James. We do this. So you know, I think it is important to ask council, you know, questions, because this budget is actually in place. It's gone out November 9th. That's tomorrow, right?
19th, sorry, Council.
19th, okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm willing to support a motion on that 500,000 in 2029 that you say there is, you know, money for. Beyond that, you do need just design to be able to do it. It's not an easy project. So, you know, I'm interested in that next steps. I understood that as next steps. This was a project I watched as chair of community services. So did Edie, who was on the committee with me when we did that. So I'm willing to, support a motion in that, but, don't want to see the trajectory of anything that we're doing to date move. Because like I said, this is an ISIP grant, the Canadian Infrastructure Program, grant, and we must do, I think, what we said we're gonna do. And it's a happy day when we have this type of funding going to one of our centers. So thoughts on that?
So you're
From the public
suggesting we
service, if
move
I-
the 500,000
Sorry,
to
Councilor
the,
Edy, I'm still talking to the public service, if I may, and
Oh,
then,
all right,
thoughts on that?
So I would say that the second scope of work that's currently out to tender is critical to being able to provide the program and services that both the department and our seniors, 55+ group that is partnering and moving into the facility require. The programmatic space that we're creating will be fully accessible, it's grade level, it'll add a tremendous amount of opportunity for the public and to, there was some conversation about do we prioritize what we're doing to do something else. My personal recommendation is that we would not do that. We, as you say, we've got a funding agreement that says this is the scope of work that we're pursuing. And I think it is critically important space for the community to be able to access. Having said that, I'm a strong supporter of accessibility, and all of our facilities struggle with that to varying degrees. And so I would love to be able to renovate the full change rooms. I think it is very, very important work. But I recognize that we have facilities all across the city that we do need to balance. And as you say, we have other centers that also have needs. So it's always a tricky thing when we're trying to break projects apart and prioritize work. But I think the fact that there is a plan to proceed with the change room and there is funding in future years in the forecast would be really helpful. I recognize for the community, it feels like we're shutting down facilities often. And
To be clear, it's all in the forecast, but council, that is up to council.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, Councilor Edy, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to hear from the public service once more.
No.
Yeah, thoughts?
well, change the scope, but
Thoughts?
I knew the answer.
Okay,
You're
Councilor
changing-
Wyatt and then Councilor.
Anyway, but
Clear.
hold it,
Oh,
hold it,
Your floor.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay, so 2029, 500,000,
Yeah.
and that's to get a detail
design.
enough to get a better estimate on cost. That's correct.
a
right?
detailed design would allow us to actually pursue the tender.
Yeah.
Provided council is willing to allocate the budget for construction.
So, well, that's my question really. Is there value, like, so in the projections, the actual money to do the work is 30 and 31. Well, it'll be in this year's budget probably. Is there value, like, is it wrong to start getting more detail accomplishing that work? Because you're hiring a consultant to get that detail. To start them, say in 26 or anything like that?
I think without a budget allocation for construction, it would be a little bit challenging, but it would be preferable to have budget allocated for the construction so that we know exactly what number we're working to.
Right. So that would be too far out from where there is capital dollars already estimated. So you don't want to do the work 4 years before actual construction would start then, right?
Correct, especially for construction drawings. And I mean,
Yeah.
I defer to Brad and Jeff because they're on the project delivery side of this equation, but typically we wouldn't want to sit on construction drawings for that period of time.
Okay.
Yeah, just one, we don't want to have code changes in the middle of design
Well, that,
where we would have to redesign or redo work. We also, given the volatile nature of construction right now, I would say that class 3 estimates are only as good as 9 months to a year out.
really? That's all? Oh,
There's no class 3 counselors. So as
Oh, I know. It's
but I'm just saying,
60%,
we factor in inflation into our future projections, but we need to we need to understand the marketplace in a more general context nearer to when council approves the money.
Counselor Edie, is there anything further? If not, I'll go to Councilors.
No, I just wanted,
Schreier.
you know, the seniors, wherever, you know, they are gonna be using the pool. We got new programming space, which is great. That's cool. It's just like, so you're looking way, quite far into the future for phase 3. To me, that's kind of troubling as well, given the distance between phase 2 and expected time of completion of phase 2 is what, 26?
So, yeah, I would suggest, Counselor, like, project schedule will be evaluated as part of the tender submission.
Right.
But I think we're anticipating the end of 26.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So right now you're at tender on the 17 million side of it. Have you had much interest in terms of participation? Can you share that?
Yeah, I think the big response has been. We did go to an RFQ.
Oh, really? Okay, you did an RFQ first.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
To narrow it down.
I wouldn't call it robust.
Okay, I guess where I'm going with this is that further to Madam Chair's, I think her suggestion, what she's is there an opportunity, potential opportunity to draw upon if there is if numbers come in right, to be able to top up to do this 500,000 that's being discussed. That was your thinking, Madam Chair?
No.
Okay.
My thinking, thanks for asking. My thinking was that you were willing to move a motion to move referral to budget. The department has said that 500,000 in 2029, followed by 3 million in 2030, and another, another allotment is subject to council, discussion and approval. My thoughts are that this has seen a lot of incredible investment, 10 million and then another 17 million to come, all with accessibility aims, all that council has scrutinized, discussed, and prioritized at one point or time. I think that's a lot of forward momentum. And if I were in the face of a petition and a local councillor, I would point out all of the accessibility renovations that have and will continue to serve the public. There's been a lot of thoughtful work on this project. At the time, we had very different community centers prioritized on our list to see the Canada Infrastructure Program. This was prioritized through some efforts of council too. And so I think that it has a lot of good momentum, a lot of good projects. There was thoughtful reasons why some have been chosen before others, and it's in a really good position. Most of us councillors would be really lucky to have this type of momentum investment and bragging material on accessibility for the programming. So if you wish to move, that's, I think, more forward momentum, and the budget working group will catch that ball. We have that capital plan that, holding spaces are really nice. So.
Well, I agree with what you're saying, Madam Chair, and I appreciate that. And I'm now aware of the future funding and future budgets, which I was not aware of until this morning's meeting. So I hear what you're saying, definitely, and I think I would support that. The only thing that I heard new here today that maybe should be flagged somehow, other than just receiving this as information, would be requesting the public service to seriously look at the liner of the pool in advance to ensure that due diligence is being properly done there in terms of ongoing maintenance of the pool tank. Because that's something that I think could really come up and surprise us in the future, and we've gone through enough of pools that we don't want to go through it again. That would be my only suggestion, Madam Chair. What your thoughts are on that?
I mean, my thoughts are that that's an aquatics matter, and that community services typically, along with Jeff Patton's group, have a handle on that and sequence things responsibly to keep everything going as they can, and then it's up to council to do that. That it's not flagged here, I think, is my be indicative of a question of timing. We can certainly ask the question and come back to the committee on what we know about that. But that typically aquatics and community services deals with that. And there's, like I said, there's been a lot of attention paid, and, you know, unlike most community centers, when we have deficits, this one has a budget. This one has phases and multi-millions. And so, in terms of a motion, I'm comfortable at a motion per the administrative, verbal report on, the budget. And really, not much else, because they're already providing their best advice, I think, on the sequencing, and I know that might disappoint folks that want to pay attention to different programming, like the aquatics and inaccessible change room. But when you have to plow down a wall for that, that takes time. So if you're still willing to move.
I'll move receipt of information to what you were saying, Madam Chair.
Counselor, you want in there?
Sure, I really appreciate this rather long discussion on this, surprisingly long, longer than I even thought it would be. I appreciate the explanation of the history of this and the future plans. I'll remind that this item is called inclusion of accessible family changing rooms in the St. James Civic Center expansion. We talked about a lot of other things, a lot of different moving parts, I guess, an expression of the fact that when you discuss one thing, you have to discuss it holistically in context of other things. That happens a lot. In this case, I've heard about new change rooms, gender-oriented change rooms. Can we talk about 2020 we talked about non-gender change rooms or non-gender washrooms? Just want to get this all clear. Both.
So maybe I'll back.
What's your question, Counselor Schneider, just to?
Well, we're talking about, the motion is called.
Yeah, the counselor came forward with a motion wanting, because prompted by a petition wanting accessible change rooms for the pool area.
Accessible family change
That's
room.
right.
Right. So that's the name of the motion. We're talking about a lot of other things, which I appreciate. So I'm not saying it's
Yeah, we
irrelevant.
talked about the washrooms in the St. James, including the ones that are accessible and the ones that are
Right.
not an accessible family.
So did we say gender-oriented change rooms? We're doing gender-oriented change rooms, and I also heard non-gender change rooms or washrooms. I just wanted to get this straight.
So what's proposed is that we would renovate the gender change rooms that we have,
The gender change rooms, yeah, okay.
renovate them, improve them, increase accessibility as much as we can. In addition to that, we would build new change rooms, and we would usually refer to them as universal change rooms, that they're intended to support people who might want to use them for a variety of reasons, whether they're, as we've talked about, perhaps a mother and son, mother and a young son, where you have parents of different gender. Or it could be somebody who has a disability. It could be somebody who has gender identity concerns and they prefer a private space. So we would be creating universal change rooms that support the full range of options for anybody who needs a change room.
And that let's say at the East Killarney on Kimberly, they've got what I would refer to as family changing rooms. Are you aware of the WISE family changing room? That's what I call them. What would you call them?
So the YMCA, I'm more familiar with the South YMCA just because it's in my neck of the woods. But they probably do refer to their change rooms as family. I think that's maybe their nomenclature and what works for them. I don't know what their parameters are for how they provide use. I'm assuming that anybody who would like a change room is welcome to use those change rooms, but.
So you consider the non-gender change rooms the family change rooms as well, as if they're universal?
Yeah.
It's universal.
Yeah, we tend to make them different sizes. So some of them might be a little bit smaller, so it's more suitable for a single individual. Versus some might be larger, so that if you have mom and 2 kids or a dad and 2 children, there's space for that family unit to be in that change room together.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Also, it was mentioned in terms of factoring in inflation in this. Got to ask, do we know at this point what is the inflation rate we're factoring in since it was discussed here?
No, I believe the words on the record was that they wanted to wait closer to the time in which that would be designed so that we could factor that in, Counselor Schreier.
Okay. So we don't know yet at this point what the inflation
It
would be.
changes every 3 months.
Yep.
Yeah, there's an annual evaluation, Counselor.
So,
Anything
Madam
for-
Chairperson, I think the councillor is moving it as information at the.
Correct. I think that was the intent.
Counselor Wyatt
Exactly.
wanted to move it as
Yeah,
information.
so,
That was the gist of your thinking, Madam Chair.
Yes, I
No, I
also
agree with
was
it.
fine if you wanted to move the status quo budget referral that, you know, community services had indicated, but that I think both serves. One would get on the record, basically as an update of, you know, where that's at in terms of the department's thinking on the St. James Civic Center. The other one, you know, wouldn't, but this obviously serves, as well as the local counselor who is still with us, would serve as a record too.
so
Both work for me.
Very good. I'll move that the report be received as information pertaining to what we received here today, and that the request in terms of the funding be referred to the 2025 budget discussion.
Any discussion, counselors?
Sure, it doesn't seem to me necessary to just pass it as information, since we've heard here that the plans do include accessible family changing rooms by terminology or perspective. Therefore, as I thought at the beginning of this, when Councillor Dobson was in delegation, that would be easy for the administration to provide those plans. Since we're talking about the non-gender change rooms as being accessible family changing rooms, therefore, if that's the terminology we're using, there's no problem passing this motion.
okay.
Counselor,
I'm gonna speak to the motion, because we're gonna call the vote. I think we had enough dialogue. I'm gonna explain why I'm voting for the motion put
okay, I'll
forward.
call the question.
Councillor, oh no, I just want to say why. This request is actually asking to have a family change room directly associated with the pool, which has nothing to do with the scope of this phase 2 work that is happening. I am supportive of actually what the administration I knew would always plan for the pools, because I know they want to meet accessibility and universal design standards. And so I will be voting for this. I'm not opposed to family change rooms, but there's no way to do this at the pool at this time during this construction phase. So that's why I'm voting the way I am.
Sorry, Councillor White, was your motion to receive the recommendation of the community committee as information or to refer the recommendation to
To
the budget
receive
review?
the information that we received from the public, the information that was verbally communicated by the public service be received as information.
Yep.
And the request of the funding of the 500,000 be referred to the 2025 budget discussions. I think that was the understanding, Madam Chair, is that correct?
Sorry, which budget year?
The next 2025.
Because you're doing the capital projections out further, right? So
Yeah, so with the understanding that that 500,000 is in the 2029 budget.
Correct. Well, and that would be the issue, deal with the budget. They would deal with whether they decide to do that or not.
So the inclusion of the plans for an accessible family change room be referred to the 2025 budget review process.
Is that the $500,000 number? Is that the $500,000 number?
So both the 2029 and the 2030 would show up in the 2025 budget forecast. If council so chose to fund it.
So the budget where you would have to decide that, but is that the $500,000 number?
$500,000 and 3 million in.
Okay, I'm not touching.
So the proper phrasing for the motion earlier is that's on phase 3 of the renewal of the St. James Civic Center.
Yes.
So 500,000 for phase 3 of the renewal of the Civic Center be referred to the 2025 budget review process.
Is that will of the chair? Is that what you're thinking?
I mean, we made a service with the already referred it, so. no
Oh,
harm
and they
done.
have, okay.
Yeah, so.
Oh, then I'll just move that we
That's
receive this
fine.
information.
Let's just receive this.
That's-
Very good. I didn't know, I wasn't aware of that. Okay.
Yeah.
So moved. All right.
Okay, so now your motion is to receive this
Receive it as
information. All those in favor?
Aye.
That's carried unanimously. Okay, lots of good discussion. Now, councillors, Marion Willis and John Boxstall are with us back in delegation. You know, I want to thank them for their patience, but I need to thank you for your indulgence because we're going to briefly move back into delegations.
So moved.
If that's all right, and we'll bring them into the meeting. They are here to talk about very important item, the majority of delegations today, and it's great to hear from both Marion Willis and John Boxstall.
Okay, so first is Marion Willis joining us via Zoom with respect to report 9.
There you are.
Marion, we'll just need to ask you to unmute your microphone and then you can proceed. You have up to 10 minutes for your presentation.
John Boxstall.
Okay, so first is Marion Willis joining us via Zoom. Sorry, well, could you mute the YouTube audio, Marion?
Hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Now we can.
To be some background here. I want to thank you very much for.
What you're gonna need to do is take the YouTube off just for the duration of the meeting. If there's a bit of a delay, you're gonna be very distracted and then everyone can hear you twice. So if you can do that, and then we can hear you fine, Marion. Is that all right, Marion?
There, is that better?
Perfect.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for being so accommodating and for this meeting this morning. And I also want to thank you. I'm assuming that you will approve the extension of the short-term lease until November of 2025. And so if that's your decision, I thank you for that. I realize that the property is of significant interest to the city. It is prime real estate, and so I'm sensitive to that as well. I'm really hoping that we can come together in this first quarter of the new year. So anytime between now and the end of the first quarter of your new year, to talk about, if not 604 St. Mary's, then when. I have to tell you that our operations have turned out to be pretty critical in the city. We have had 740 encampment calls that we've attended to. We've had 14,759 interactions with people in encampments since January. We have housed 261 people since January out of encampments. And that brings our total of people that we've housed out of encampments to 1,247. And we've also provided 16,000 plus wellness checks to people that we have housed. So, you know, in terms of the city's investment into St. Boniface Street Links, I think you've received some pretty good return on your investment, because all of these outcomes have occurred since the city began to fund our outreach team. So I thank you, and I know that the citizens of Winnipeg thank you as well. It is really critical that we have a home soon. It becomes very difficult to try to plan budget-wise, staffing, just in terms of how we serve the city, if we have the uncertainty of never knowing really whether we have a place to operate out of. So I guess that's my message to you, is that, you know, if not 604 St. Mary's, then where? There were a few other potential options discussed when Mike Jack was still the CEO. I think one of them was an old fire hall that was down, I think, Marion Street somewhere, out closer to Dugald. I don't know the location doesn't really come to mind. I understood though that Winnipeg Fire Services would have to agree to that. So it just sounds like there's a lot of discussion that has to be had, you know, in order for us to come up with some kind of alternative plan.
Okay, very fair, Marion. Were you presenting together or did you want to continue with your presentation? You've got time left. Counselors will have questions for you.
Yeah, no, I think that's it for me. I mean, I understand the position that you're in. I understand the value of the building, right? I guess the concern that we talk about ending homelessness, and I know there was a lot of effort within the city to consider, a different approach to ending homelessness, which was the Houston model. The Houston model is really just a barrier-free model to end homelessness that has a whole network built around it. We've been doing that for 6 years, which is why we're a little bit different than other organizations, why we don't meet criteria for existing funding agreements and so on. And we have tried to demonstrate that that is a really good model. That's a different conversation for a different day with a different group of people. But we're not going to end homelessness by turning everything into affordable housing. We actually have to find a way to build some low barrier housing, identify low barrier housing. Something for property and planning to think about is how we bring back some of those low barrier housings and get them to meet fire code. We have a lot of empty buildings sitting out there. But for now, for this meeting, this is really just about 604 St. Mary's. And if not 604 St. Mary's, then what other options are there? And could we please, ramp up the discussions around that? Because we all know how long it takes, for the city to make decisions. And that's, no fault of yours. Everybody has a process, right? It also takes quite a lot of investment and effort to make a building meet code so that it can actually be operational. It won't be long before it's November again of 2025. And hopefully we're not having this discussion then as the snow begins to fly and we're as homeless as the people that we try to serve. So that's my presentation. I just want you to know I'm thankful for the investment the city has made in us. I feel proud of the outcomes we've been able to produce, and we want to continue to do that.
So full disclosure, this, Marion, that your husband is my former boss. So no doubt at home, I think about you often. I was upset that my quote in the paper was somewhat, not misquoted. I absolutely said, you're an easy yes. This is an easy yes today. But the juxtaposition that comes to us within the report is just, does juxtapose sort of that the St. Boniface Street Links with other ambitions that the same department even has it's almost the same department has staff have for housing. And obviously we work to do, you're such a critical part of the non-emergent encampment funding that we put in. The results speak for themselves and have since the first report came to council, and I know I was holding my breath because I wanted to see funding that we had put in, however tiny the funding was, be sustained. And you provided council with some very compelling data, as you have again today, that we needed to continue on with these life-sustaining social services that we have to encampments and at 604 St. Mary's. I think it is a good call to action that you make to get back together with you in the first quarter here to talk about how we can alleviate the administrative burden on St. Boniface Street Links. Your implicit question, if not here, where, I think is a very key one. And so I will commit as chair of housing to get back meeting with you in short order, because that's really critically important, and to understand some of the you know, some of the emails that you get, like I do, of that are impatient and yet, you know, not understanding of the budgets that the very small budgets and the added bureaucracy that you have, and uncertainty you have on top of the life-sustaining social service that you cobble together. So Councillor Wyatt has a question for you, but I don't know if you have a response to that. I'll commit to coming out to see you. Councillor Wyatt has a question for you though.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Then Councillor Egan.
Thank you. Marion, I just preface my question by saying thank you for all the work that you do in your organization. We have your information sheet here, but of course, I think we're all very familiar with the work you do, and we thank you for the work you do and your organization, your board of directors, your volunteers. As somebody who has personally lived addiction issues, I think I can speak with a fair bit of knowledge to say that the work that you do is actually incredible, and your organization. I want to say that, are you open to preface it? I have to ask kind of, are you aware questions, because it's not me to make a speech, but more ask questions. Are you aware that in 1998, 99, 2000, and 2001, the city of Winnipeg, as one time, for a long time, was in the social services business? That we, as a municipality, along with the other municipalities of Manitoba, removed ourselves from that business by negotiating with the province of Manitoba to take over full social service responsibilities. And that to this day, number one, are you aware of that? And second part of my question, that to this day, over $21 million is deducted from the city of Winnipeg grant from the province of Manitoba to the city as part of that negotiation, which took into consideration the recession of the early 1990s as an ongoing obligation to the city. Are you aware of that?
You know, I am, and I will comment on that because unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I haven't decided yet. I'm a bit of a living historian. I've been doing this for a long time. And you know, I have to say that back in the day, we had a much more effective social services system when the city actually had a budget for social services. We didn't face many of the challenges that we face today. And there wasn't always this back and forth between the municipal government and the provincial government. You had some people at the helm that did an absolutely fine job, and the city was very, very good at strategic planning. And you had some solid plans to address many of the challenges that we face today. Unfortunately, it went to the province. Eventually, we would end up in sort of the siloed systems that we still battle today. So there was a time, yes, when things were much better than they are. And I do think that if the city had a lot more control over social services and had a much larger budget to do this, that we would, I don't know if we'd get ahead of things, but I think we'd get a better handle on things. It's really challenging when you have to rely on transfer payments from the province or a commitment from the province to fund some of the challenges that the city just can't fund out of taxpayer money.
Well, thank you for the answer to the question, but we are now officially out of the social services business, is my point. And
yeah, I got your point. But I will say to you.
Hold on, Marion, hold on.
Yeah.
I want to ask my other question. Are you, province of Alberta, for example, has been leading the country when it comes to addictions and mental health. In August, they had a 44% drop in their overdose rate from the year before. Why is your organization and other organizations like yours not holding the province accountable instead of coming to the city when it's no longer our jurisdiction to hear these matters?
Yeah, well, you know, actually I do, but you know, here's the thing. You're the politician. I'm the service provider. I'm the one that's out there knee deep in the trenches with this. And in this city, we have people dying in encampments and on the street every single day. For me, you know, I have to hope that the city politicians and the provincial politicians, you know, and the federal government, we need a new national drug strategy to address these things. But in the interim, we can't just watch people die on the street. I mean, Winnipeg is now, you know, sort of holding the dubious distinction of having some of the highest, negative social indicators per capita of any city across Canada. So, we can get into the political debate of, which level of government is responsible for what, but we're in a crisis, a humanitarian crisis right now. And we need to pull together to do what we can the best way we can. I agree with you, by the way, that the city needs, or the province needs to be investing in the types of programs that leave no one behind. Right now in the city, about 70% of homelessness is completely left behind because we haven't come up with a plan to address homelessness, to a way to end homelessness for everybody. Again, I think that that's a discussion at a different table, maybe with all of you. But right now we're talking about a building, and our organization cannot operate without a building. The city council and the mayor did promise St. Boniface Street Links a city-owned building with a no-cost lease, and that's why I'm before you today. If not 604 St. Mary's, then where?
My final question, Madam Chair, is the $1 million that we have now approved of the 2023 budget. The way I look at that, that's $1 million that I cannot now spend on maintaining a city facility or investing into a service that we are responsible for with our limited budget. And are you aware that the federal government and the provincial government are now collecting billions, gambling, cigarettes,
Sorry,
alcohol,
Councillor
and
Wyatt.
tobacco? My question
Sorry,
is this.
no,
Madam
I'm
Chair.
the chair, Councillor Wyatt,
Yeah.
and while your question it's entering a debate, Marion Willis, when she's before us on an item that frankly we pay her for. So while you might want to debate Marion Willis on what went down decades ago when the NDP government uploaded social services last term, I saw the same irony as you, and this is a great discussion, but I don't think it's fair for Marion Willis. She probably has an answer to that, but I don't think it's fair to then put that on her shoulders with respect to the 1 million, and it's my job to keep decorum, right?
No, I appreciate that, Madam
So you
Chair.
can answer it a different way.
Sure, that's fair enough.
right.
My question would be this, Marion. Knowing how much money that the federal and provincial governments are collecting now in taxes, excise taxes on tobacco and liquor, cannabis, lotteries, and knowing how limited the city's ability is in terms of our existing tax powers, and knowing historically now the fact that the province did fully take over social issues away from the city, what is being done from the point of view, I guess, of all the agencies, including yourself, to lobby the provincial government and the federal government to push them to live up to their responsibilities, as is being done presently in the province of Alberta?
Yeah. I don't know if I can speak on behalf of other organizations. I have done a lot of lobbying with the federal government to try to get them to understand that we need a new national drug strategy, that we can't end homelessness without addressing the drug crisis. So I agree with you. Do I think that Manitoba lotteries and the taxes from tobacco sales should be put back into addressing addiction? And that would be a great source of funding for our organizations. I can't disagree with you on that. I've also suggested that. But again, I think that these are issues for discussion at another time. I invite every single one of you to come and visit us at 604 St. Mary's. I think that when you come and you visit us at 604 St. Mary's, I think you'll find that a visit dispels some myths and actually puts some great context to the work that we do, the population we serve, and also to best understanding our needs. And of course, understanding need is paramount to actually identifying a building that can meet the needs of this organization. So I hope you will, Councillor Rollins, I invite you to visit us soon, and I hope you will take me up on that offer at your earliest convenience, and the rest of you around the table as well. It's an open invitation. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Edie and Schreier have questions for you, Marion.
Yes, thank you.
Marion, ever since I've known you since 2007, what you say, I believe, I listen because I know the work you do, you don't take it lightly, and you are on a mission. So, and have been ever since I known you. I don't really need to visit there. I listen to you, and you're explained to me that need and so on. I keep it, and I like the work that the outcomes you're getting and the work you do is outstanding to me. Now, by the way, I'll just clarify some misnomers. The uploading of social service happened under the Filman government,
Yes, it did.
not the NDP government. And actually, just so everybody also knows, the full 21 or whatever $1 billion it is every year, half of that was related to community nursing, which the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority, I think, is now providing out of from buildings such as the one at Logan and Maine. I have I'm not getting, so I was seeing kind of a future where you have a facility, what you call low barrier housing, maybe in the future where you have all kinds of places where even like totally mixed use people who are sort of on top of things or whatever, experiencing life in a better way than others. But can you just quickly explain low barrier housing? Is that just?
Yeah, I can, and I know that that probably people on council and certainly out there in the city of Winnipeg have heard me comment on buildings like the ADNAC and building on Yonge Street. Some of these older heritage buildings that house a lot of people being taken out of commission because they don't meet fire code and so on. Those types of buildings being renovated and brought back online are really good buildings for low barrier. Basically means that there are no conditions to living there, and you understand that the people that you're going to house in those buildings are going to take there's going to be a considerable amount of work to help those individuals make that transition from having lived outside for a long time to living inside. Oftentimes you can attend some of those low barrier buildings and walk into apartments and it looks as though you're in an indoor encampment. It's a monumental amount of work, hence our 16,000 plus wellness checks on people to work with individuals. Again, a topic for another day. I would love to sit with a committee or even see a working committee pulled together where we talk about ways and means of addressing some of the issues attached to some of those older buildings that are good for low barrier housing, to prevent them from actually going offline, or maybe the city actually completes work and bills it to the property owners. I don't know. There's got to be better alternatives, because many of the people that are out there homeless right now are people that are displaced out of those buildings. Out of a lot of those buildings because of fires and violence and all kinds of things. So again, that speaks to when we talk about low barrier housing, we're talking about housing where you actually have to have a staffed building with people on site to prevent a lot of the challenges from occurring.
Right.
A lot of the housing that is being planned for is, housing for lower income people, affordable housing. People that we work with need low barrier housing. Some of them are going to need assisted living for a long time.
Yeah.
So lots of different types of housing models. I would note that out of 986 people that we housed over 36 months ending March 31st, 15% or 148 of those individuals are no longer using substances. They have recovery plans and have been moved into far better housing than what they started out in. But low barrier housing is a place to start, and you can be sure that without the proper supports in place, that the buildings will never meet fire code. There's always going to be issues. So you really need to have, you know, teams that are present in those buildings all the time.
Great, okay, thanks, much appreciated. So.
We are taking on a building actually in the inner city. We're taking on 259 Fountain December 1st with 28 rooms and 6 suites. And we are putting a team in there and we will model what that actually looks like. And these will all be low barrier tenants going into that particular building. We'll be exclusively populating that building with a model that demonstrates how that all works. But again, I want to come back to the reason for this particular meeting, which is, you know, and I have to ask you, you know, it seems that when St. Boniface Streetlinks was promised a, you know, a city-owned building with a no-cost lease, it seems as though nobody really checked with real estate to see if they even had a building. And, you know, so I think that, you know, what I would like to know, you know, are there buildings available? Where are those buildings? We cover a vast area. And, you know, I certainly wouldn't be opposed to anything from Point Douglas through to St. Boniface, Transcona, St. Vital. You know, we cover a vast area.
Yeah.
So when I meet with you, I'm happy to go over the real estate framework.
Yeah, you'll have to do that, but I just wanted to say that we had a report that talked about not-for-profits leases on buildings that we were looking at selling. So most of our buildings actually that are occupiable are occupied, right? So just thought I'd let you know that. Except for the one, you know, we receive small houses like in residential one properties and stuff, but that would you'd never be able to handle your operations in just a house or a duplex, right?
No.
Anyway,
and that would create a great deal of strain on a neighborhood. But I thank you for your comments, Mr. Eady, Councillor Eady.
Councillor Schreier, you wanted to ask a question too?
Sure. I won't say as much as any of my fellow councillors on this one. A lot of good things have been said and asked as well, mostly stated, but asked as well. Important conversations. I'll just weigh in to say that, you know, there's different models, different provinces or states or whatever. We'll have different models, whatever works, as long as we ever act together. Our city, as a city, we certainly have our obligations, which is what we're dealing with today with this agenda item, as it is property and development. And this is where we can assist, especially the other levels of government. So here we are. Having said that, we're in this together. You know, we're talking about the other low barriers. To me, I don't consider Silo Mission or Salvation Army a low barrier. Indinomac, to me, which is the one I visited the most, I know that one to be low barrier. I don't consider Silo or Salvation Army low barrier. So when you say low barrier to me, I think Indinomac. And I see why it is. I don't need to discuss it here, how it is low barrier. But having
no, but that's a shelter. There's a difference between housing, like shelters, and low barrier housing.
But we're mentioning Silo, and we're mentioning these low barrier. These are shelters, but that is low barrier. The other ones aren't. So this is low barrier.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah, and this is low barrier, but it's low barrier, not shelter, but housing. Low barrier housing. So this is new to me in terms of terminology and application, and I need to visit this one as well. It's not as close as the other ones are to me, so I don't think I'll be visiting as often. Having said that, Marion, thanks for mentioning, because earlier on last term and either my first or second term, there's been times due to stigma, and I understand, don't necessarily, it's not 100% overlap homelessness and drug crisis, but thank you for mentioning that for saying that you can't address homelessness without addressing the drug crisis. Absolutely true, and we're not being practical and realistic. We're not trying if we don't admit to that. So thank you, Marion. That's an evolution here at City Hall in terms of delegations that we've had, and we just can't ignore that. Having said that, I want to get back to this. In terms of this, you have rooms. You're right, and Indinomac just has beds, all in one room, kind of thing. In this case, you talk about 28 rooms for another area. How many units are you talking about? How many beds per unit or per room?
Actually, in the building we're gonna move into, we're going to have one apartment in there has 4 bedrooms, and we're going to use that as a drug stabilization unit as an alternative to detox. We're going to offer recovery services in the building. They're not mandatory, but people will be able to access recovery services if they want to in there by replicating some aspects of Warburg House into the Fountain address. And then all of the individuals that will occupy those rooms will be people that would be some of the more difficult people to house.
Okay. In terms of St. Mary's Road here, just to get back to the
Yes.
in itself, how many units are we talking about here?
In St. Mary's Road?
Yeah.
St. Mary's Road, what we operate there is we have a 20-bed shelter with 20 beds. Those 20 beds are designated to Winnipeg hospitals right now because Winnipeg, our hospitals are having quite a challenging time, as you know, with wait times and no beds. And Winnipeg hospitals have become shelters for people that can't be discharged because there's no place to discharge them to. So with our 20 beds, we've been able to free up 130 hospital beds since April, which has really improved the flow through emergency rooms. And then also you'll start to see that reflected in the wait times at hospitals. We also there run a 24/7 safe space program for people just coming in off the street. And it's through those 2 programs, along with our general outreach, that we're able to get people out of encampments, link them to income supports, and attach them to housing. So we're a pretty comprehensive, I would say really a holistic kind of program. All of the programs and services that we deliver are all interrelated and interconnected. We don't house anybody at 604 St. Mary's. That's the triage center where you come and you get linked to all kinds of supports.
Okay. Thank you very much for that explanation. And if we can't help you do what you do, I don't know what we're going to do. So thank you very much, Marianne, and let's just keep working together.
Yeah, thank you.
And there will be tensions along the way because there will be gray areas where we placement, location, intensity of like how I think we've had a discussion before last term in terms of how many units in a house and things like this, and how many people we're allowed to house and things like this. That won't end, but we still have to keep working on this and do more. So thank you.
Okay, John Boxstall is still with us in delegation. If we can move to John Boxstall, and then right after John, we'll manage this item if we can. A break has been requested. Yeah, but if we can go to John Boxstall, your patience should be lauded. Thank you for being here, and in particular on this item.
Thank you. Thanks for understanding the troubles I was having joining the meeting earlier. Councillors, it's good to be here. John Boxstall, I'm chairman of Boxstall Construction, but I'm here as a board member of St. Boniface Street Links in support of the lease for 604 St. Mary's. Plenty has been said. There's not much more for me to add. From the building operation perspective and my construction perspective, I wanted to make note that 604 St. Mary's Road was a city council building. So it is not exactly a glove fit for Street Links. We have done some remedial work to make it to have it meet life safety last year. So any further investment in the building, as you look at a 1-year lease, year-to-year lease, any further investment is done, can't be done. It needs an upgrade to actually really complement the services that Street Links provides there. So they need a home, and that is obvious. We are the facilitator. We are the entity that provides all the services on the east side of the river. I'm proud of this side of the river. I'm a born and bred St. Boniface boy. Boxstall Construction does a lot of work for all the agencies in the downtown core. Main Street Project, Slow Mission, Lighthouse Mission, Mama Way. We're involved with all of them, and we've seen the type of facilities they need. Everyone has a slightly different recipe and a slightly different service model there. StreetLinks, as Marion has just aptly described, is somewhat different. So things are a little bit compromised at 604. What we really need is for the lease to become a 10-year lease, or if not 604, as said already, where else? And what I would bring from the community, I know the community is waiting to see more done. We can rally support from the community, from business people, connected to me. And so there's a willingness to do more. I noticed earlier in your docket, you're talking about a piece of property, the old St. Boniface East Community Club, where I used to freeze my toes. That's a brownfield site. Hey, maybe that's something that could become a home for StreetLinks. So we'd really like to get involved in site selection, as I do for many clients, and maybe find a solution for StreetLinks that would make sense for everyone concerned. So thank you. That was just my piece to add to the conversation.
Okay, I've got a follow-up meeting coming. Councillors have questions for you.
Just one quick question.
So Councillor Wyatt and then Councillor Edie.
Mr. Boxall, thank you for your ongoing dedication and your service to the city and the community. We're very aware of the good work that your company does, philanthropic for charity. And I just want to, I guess, what I expressed earlier, and as somebody who's personally experienced it, I find it very frustrating how we can have an ongoing, what I call an urban health crisis, which is really a mental health crisis taking place in our communities across this country, including Winnipeg, which is driving the entire issue of homelessness and the addiction file, which is it's a mental health crisis that is here, followed by the urban crisis caused by homelessness and addiction. And that yet we see in other jurisdictions in this country, namely Alberta now, which is leading the country, investing in recovery facilities and supporting agencies like yourself, and leading the charge actually in terms of being frontline treatment providers. I hope you can appreciate what, at least what I'm trying to get across, and that is that until there is a coordinated approach by the provincial and federal government, led by the province, to deal with this issue, you're going to be constantly putting out fires like this and coming to municipalities for help when it's not our jurisdiction. Do you understand what I'm getting at? It'd be like me, Mr. Boxall, coming to you and saying, can you repair my truck? Wait a minute, I'm in the construction business of building new buildings and homes, not in the repair business. We have a city that's falling apart right now, Mr. Boxall, on many fronts, as you know. And we need the province and the feds to step up. You understand what I'm getting at?
Sure. And it's a multi-level solution that's needed. The citizens that are affected here are citizens of Winnipeg. The citizens that are affected are my friends and neighbors. The neighborhoods that are affected are my old neighborhoods and my new neighborhoods. You know, so it's not something that we can pass off to one level or the other, but that also needs a unified approach. So, you know, we're all frustrated by this, but sitting on our hands and doing nothing to improve conditions, improve the deliverable, improve so that the deliverables that StreetLinks can bring are enhanced and complemented. We all want to be out of these agencies like StreetLinks and Main Street Project want to be out of business soon. But until that the causes are eradicated, we have to provide solutions.
I appreciate your response, Mr. Boxall, and I want to thank you for that. And I just would, you're familiar with the term, it's a term in recovery called enabling. That when you do something for somebody, sometimes it enables them to continue on with their addiction or their challenge. Yes. I would argue that by the city stepping up, we are almost enabling the province of the Manitoba and the federal government to continue to not do what they should be doing.
Well, they are funding StreetLinks.
No, I know, but it's enabling them to continue to ignore the public policy that they are responsible for. But thank you, Mr. Boxall.
Any further questions for Mr. Boxtel? I see one. If you're willing, Mr. Boxtel, Counselor.
I just have one quick question. I'm not gonna get political, Mr. Boxwell. I just wanted to, so you were looking over our other reports quite clearly and that you seen the East St. Boniface, possibility for, that is a possible sale item from the city. Had you had a chance to read other reports about, well, I think they're mostly occupied though, but have you, it's obviously did your research, have you reviewed any other city documents that usually come through this standing committee, looking for potential property?
No, Councillor, I haven't. That's just a bit of luck that I spotted that on your agenda. I think to what Marion put forward and to what Councillor Rollins has offered to do, I think would be very beneficial. As I said, if we could have a closer look at the listing of properties, maybe there's something that we can make work. You know, beggars can't be choosers, but maybe we can we can choose something that would solve everybody's headache.
Yeah, and just a follow-up on that. Has Marion or yourself as chair or anything, have you had and looked at any possibilities with provincial-owned buildings?
No, sir, we haven't. Nothing's been preferred to us, shown to us.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Did you know, put it this way, John Boxtel, we could talk all day. There's a lot of work to do and a lot of things to discuss. Thanks for your presentation. I'll leave it at that. And thanks for your work with this.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for hearing us.
How about we take 10 minutes, then we'll come back to
Thank
this
you, Madam
item, make a decision, go ahead.
Wonderful.
We're moving back into the regular agenda item with thanks to the delegations. Up next is item number 5, transformational employment opportunity sites, and with us is Mark Pute.
Thanks, Madam Chair. For this one, we're requesting an extension of up to 30 days to report back.
So moved by Councillor Wyatt.
I have a question.
Mhm.
What is this?
To report back on.
No, what is transformational employment opportunities? What is this?
So it's readying potentially a site for development for major companies to move into town. You know, historically, there's been Amazon, others.
So this is not about us hiring people.
No, it's about,
That's the way kind of the title read to me.
yeah, no, it's about employment plans.
Oh, this is employment land.
Right.
Okay. Is there a way for us to maybe slightly modify the headline or the title of this, transformation employment lands opportunity sites?
It's a report back, so I think that'd be an issue.
Yeah, that was the original title.
Title? Well, I know clerks sometimes assign this, maybe it's just a suggestion because it's somewhat confusing. I thought we're now getting into the hiring and the employment business.
No, okay.
Okay,
Sorry for
all
that
right,
confusion.
okay, all right. I'm glad for the clarification.
Are you willing to move, Sir Wyatt?
I will move that.
Councillor Schreier has a question.
Is this
Yeah.
a ground land site?
So there were 3 sites that were identified within the original scope of the report back. It was the south end, land adjacent to the South End Pollution Control Center. Lands along Des Trappistes, south end of the city, and a former sludge drying bed, which is actually located outside of the city along the perimeter highway.
Okay, but it's a new term. Is this brownfill? Is this what it is? Like how is it different from brownfill? Those provide opportunities too. Is it just providing site?
For sure. What council directed us to do was identify whether the specific 3 properties were suitable for transformational employment opportunity sites.
Okay, so you got the term from that. Okay.
I'll move it, well, Madam Chair.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks for the extension. We'll move to review of the development agreement parameters, land value.
Very straightforward, Madam Chair. I move approval.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Right.
Any opposed? That was carried unanimously. Review of sale price of city-owned industrial parkland.
Also very straightforward. I move approval, Madam Chair.
Excellent. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Proposed lease agreement between Phoenix Soccer.
Had a chance to read it. Very straightforward. I move approval, Madam
For
Chair.
which one's this? Or-
This is Phoenix Soccer Inc., item number 8. and
Oh,
then
right,
we
yeah,
would have had
yeah, yeah.
900 around.
The only suggestion going forward, if possible, is that if in the event that there are any changes, if it's a renewed lease, if there's any changes, if they can be highlighted in red, if there's any cross outs, they can be crossed out in red so that we can know the difference between the two leases, if in the event this is a renewal. Just FYI, that would be the only thing that I would.
So moved by Counselor Wyatt. All those in favor?
Aye.
That was also, I believe, carried unanimously.
I'd like to move, okay.
Request to enter into a consecutive short-term use agreement with St. Boniface Street Links.
Yeah,
Counselor
move
Wyatt wishes
approval.
to move
What's that?
I move approval.
of the
This-
recommendation.
Is this not the,
This is St. Boniface Street Link.
right? And this is
Counselor Edie.
a 1-year extension with a chance for a second year?
Actually, Councilor, this is the second short-term use agreement that we're gonna enter into, and because council policy only allows us to do so for one term for 1 year, standing policy committee approval is required to do a consecutive one, so a second 1-year term.
Good declaration.
Right, it sounds like, there was reference to the former East St. Boniface Community Center or whatever it was called.
That's that's number 10.
Well, that's report 10.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
but what I'm getting at is, so we can only do this 1 year right now? It might, like, let's say that East St. Boniface thing's available. And the possibility, and then they'll have to look at the money to renovate the building, right, whatever, on that property, or whatever, like, I don't see that being accomplished in one short year.
Yeah, maybe if I can just jump in here. The Public Service Administration has the ability to enter into short-term leases, so 1-year lease. Anything beyond that requires SPC's direction if it's not at market, which this isn't. So that's the reason we're coming back. The reason that we've asked for the additional year is the city has a limited number of buildings that it can use for other tenants. And so we're just evaluating what options we might have. So I expect that we're likely to come back in the new year with more of a long-term recommendation for street links.
Okay, good, all right. So
Yeah.
moved.
So moved by Counselor Wyatt. If I could put some words on the record, already committed to a meeting. I think we might have had it arranged already. If we need to, I think everyone's amenable to put it back on our agenda in January or, first quarter. You heard Marion look at that. You heard John Boxtall ask for 10 years. So I'll go investigate, report back to the Standing Policy Committee on Property and Development. I think January agenda item is probably warranted for this. We can look at that. I think, Counselor Wyatt, you raised some really critical points that in the media interviews I did on the report that in fact I was trying to illustrate. The week that our report published was the same week that Premier Ford used the notwithstanding clause with 15 mayors, or suggested that he would use it. Why? Because some of those 15 mayors had gone to court and they had entered into discussions with the court that they wanted to vacate encampments. They were not able to. And they were not able to. Why? Lack of appropriate housing. So I did think, as chair of housing and property development, this report was somewhat poetic in the light of what was happening in Ontario, insofar as it juxtaposes permanent housing to temporary transitional housing. And I too think there is some irony, although that the Philman years, and the Sellinger continued, something that I have talked to Premier Sellinger about. That continued with the uploading of housing, nursing, EIA to the provincial government. And last term, when I entered council and we were in a housing crisis for pretty much the majority of that term, you know, I saw it along with Councillor Edie right by my side every day at Community Services as Chair of Protection, to really rebuild the housing unit, rebuild some of those social service connections, because as Marian said, there was a crisis. We do have some language in the charter that says we're responsible for health. And in light of the crisis, we've moved into social service spaces, whether it's the 24/7 safe space that honestly Velma's House wouldn't have started hadn't it been for the committee that we're on, Councillor Edie, you'll remember, at Community Services, the 3.5 million in encampment and more that we put in last term that remains with us. And so I really, you know, I might have sounded like, I was cutting you off, Councillor Wyatt, but really I am hungry for that debate because as you said, cities have limited fiscal capacity, yet we seem to be really bearing the burden of housing as a human right on all aspects. We've now rebuilt some social services that perhaps we never thought we would see again, i.e. a housing unit at the city of Winnipeg. There's a part of me that regrets not also considering, you know, some of the debates we had last term and saying, well, we should perhaps then ask the province if we can have it back, you know, in a letter, or, you know, given that when you upload it in your a charter city with enabling legislation like we have, it is a pretty strong message to us that the province uploaded it and maybe, you know, it implied that we shouldn't be doing that, right? We know our fiscal constraints and we're hard pressed to afford it. We know we can't go into a deficit because of our legislation. So that appropriate housing question before we vacate and dismantle encampments is really a question for other governments. I agree with you on that. I was surprised and negotiated really hard with councillors who occupied the same space that housing was a different order of government's issue, that because the feds were providing us with a stream of funding, we had to catch that ball. So that's neither here nor there for an agency like Marian Willis, who's just doing the work of the city that she's contracted to do with a building that she had asked for and we're leasing to her. But I think I'm hungry for that debate. And I'm particularly hungry when MLAs write ward residents that we might share a reminder that lacks nuance on housing as a human right and what the courts have decided, and instead just says, well, city councillors are responsible for dismantling. That drives me bananas.
Responsible for what, sorry? That would
responsible for dismantling encampment. Without the nuance that appropriate housing is the test before an encampment is dismantled. So to that end, you know, I plan on doing some letter writing on something that I didn't think folks would need a reminder. And so again, you know, this doesn't have to be about all of that. And I think that it is up to politicians, like Marian said, to work that out, to host the tables and convene the meetings. And in part, she's keenly aware because she's friends with, you know, the Sellinger. She knows folks and was around at the time that it was uploaded in, you know, in the years in the late 90s by the Philman government and then wasn't given back. So anyways, Councillor Wyatt.
I just want to say, Madam Chair, that I think you and I share the same concerns and thoughts on this matter. Having just come from the Community Services Committee, I can tell you, I've said to friends and others that we do a better job in our society today looking after feral cats than we do our fellow human beings. And as somebody who has lived these challenges, I always, when I see folks in the streets, I say there, by the grace of God, go. If it wasn't for my family and friends, would either be out there or I'd be gone. And so I speak just as frustrated as you, I think, when it comes to the fact that, and I also like to point out that it was in the 1930s when 25% of the people were laid off overnight. The main breadwinners were one person in a family that would have starved to death if it wasn't for municipalities and churches keeping people alive and shaming literally the higher levels of government to create EI, to create the social safety nets we have today. And that we're almost at the same point here now when it comes to this issue. But that we should be keeping track of the bill in light of the fact that they deduct us these costs. And we should be saying back to them, if you wish us, we'll step up and do what you should be doing in the first place. But we want that bill to be recognized that you're deducting off our grant annually every year, going back to that agreement made with the Philmont government, with all the municipalities in Manitoba. And we know, I agree with you 100% on, to me, Madam Chair, the crisis flows out of a mental health issue, mental health crisis. And out of that comes the addictions and the homelessness. And until we recognize that, which the province of Alberta has now done, and they are leading the country building facilities. It's called, the guy by the name of last name Marshall Globe Mill had a front page article called the Marshall Plan, they're calling it. Transforming that province. It can be done, but until the province, and I don't care what political party seems to be in power, doesn't seem to want to rise to this challenge, maybe we do have to
Rise to their responsibility.
Thank you. Maybe we do have to do it and shame them into doing it, as was done by municipalities in the 1930s across this country, and to keep families and people alive at that time of that crisis. And I just want to say as well that in no way, shape, or form am I critical of Mary Wilson, the frontline service she's doing amazing work. I will say though, that having gotten to know these different groups and organizations because of my own personal experience, and having been in a background where I worked for the AMM at one time as the Director of Policy Communications on the staff level, that sometimes the groups are their own worst enemies in the sense that they are great at providing the services on the front line, but they're not great at organizing themselves to be a front, one common front. There's a lot of backbiting I saw that goes on, fighting over the same money. When they could be a united front, they almost need a kind of an organization to do that for, to lobby and to push government because they are part of that solution. Right now, it's all kind of random one-offs happening everywhere where we're not taking a whole comprehensive view of what the crisis is right now in the streets of the city of Winnipeg, same across every major city and community outside of Winnipeg, even in this province. So I just want to put those thoughts on the record and just, as well, just one other thing. And I don't say this as a criticism. I just say this as a more of a fact that the mayor's office has indicated that they had hired a staff person, their policy person. We've been waiting eagerly to hear about a comprehensive policy pertaining to this matter, both in terms of the urban mental health crisis in the streets tied to that, the addictions and housing crisis. We have been waiting that. I think this speaks to the need. Part of that should be a strategy around how we deal with the provincial and federal government in terms of funding of these items. I have stated to the mayor's office more than once and to the mayor personally that I'm prepared to assist on that matter. If he needed any, there's been no follow-up on that end, but I know they're very busy on many things. But that's something that I think would assist us in terms of public policy of the city if we were to have that versus the one-offs that our staff are having to deal with now pertaining to issues like this one. And struggling with this one, we're doing this, it's going to come back. And I appreciate what you're doing. The fact you're prepared to meet and bring it back and take that time. But you're a very busy person. We all are. Mayor's office has more supports than it's an individual council, even including a chairperson. We need that support and that work, and I'm prepared to assist. You know, and anyway, I just want to say that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, Schreier, go ahead and then.
Sure. And then, well, I want to make a final comment.
I know, but I said that. I just suggested to Edie, you know, that Schreier would go a little before you.
Okay.
You've actually been going in sequential order all meeting, so we'll jump to Schreier.
Has it been going that way? I thought Ross has been going before me, but nonetheless.
That's my point.
Oh, okay, all right. It doesn't matter. I tend to go last, but whatever. But anyway, in this case, there's so many ways to take this because this is a gigantic conversation. We're taking some leeway right now through our chair. to have this bit of a conversation. I'm going to mention this, of the numerous things that could be said. We're talking about the province, that's not wrong. I want to make the point that when it came to the Housing Accelerator Fund, just bear in mind, the federal government bypassed the provinces. They went directly to the municipalities. They made bilateral agreements with the municipalities. And when a big power makes bilateral agreements with separate little powers, do the little powers win? And in this case, we saw what happened. And this happened all across the country by bypassing the provinces. These cities were almost competing with themselves to deregulate. I understand we did this in the name of affordable housing, and that's why we did it. We had to take the money, otherwise we wouldn't have affordable housing. But really, this was a deregulation, not for the purposes of this. We call it, it is to make housing more affordable. But is this the best, the municipalities in these big cities? If this is such a big issue, and we're talking about the province, how are we going to talk about the federal government in terms of what they, I'm going to say, imposed on the municipalities, individual by bilateral rather than a multilateral agreement? We didn't stand up for ourselves. We didn't stand up with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. The big cities didn't get together and say, hey, mind you, the provinces could have helped us with that. That's where we could have put some pressure on the provinces. But they were bypassed. Now Winnipeg is 2% of the population of Canada. And we had this 2% city had a bilateral agreement with the federal government. That's the giant when it comes to finances, including what we can do for housing. And let's face it, what the government of Canada, what Canada can do to deal with these crises that we're dealing with. Yes, we have to deal with the provinces, but my goodness, if the Housing Accelerator Fund wasn't a very good indication of where the municipalities have to stand up for themselves, we're missing the boat. I understand. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, I remember it was just a year ago, the half came, we had to make a decision right away. Not only did it was a bilateral agreement, we had to make a decision right away. And then we're caught. We didn't use our tools for the Federation of Municipalities, and we didn't use our tools like we want to put pressure on the provinces. And this is where we're at. It is the discussion in terms of what the role is with the province with us. It is absolutely, given the half, proof that it is our obligation to put pressure on the federal government. If we can't do that amongst the big cities or through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, maybe we shouldn't allow our provinces to be bypassed when it comes to helping us negotiate for that funding for this crucial issue for which we need massive funding and planning.
Can I just say, Councillor Schreier, that's why I was so hungry for this exact debate.
Okay.
Because you're what you call, deregulation, the Canadian Center for Policy Alternatives sort of calls quiet erosion of, essentially our and they actually said it's a disaster in the making. I don't agree necessarily, but what I found fascinating, when you look to the east and you look to the west, you saw when Ford actually said, I'm going to use the notwithstanding clause, you saw a federal minister go out and then within 1 month start saying, I'm bypassing the province. And that I think is a very strong erosion. I understand why he did it. He also said why he did it, i.e. encampments are such an emergency that if the province isn't coming to the table immediately to match the encampment money that he was putting on the table. But with 1 month, given the millions implied by a provincial government, that's a lot. And similar to the Rapid Housing Initiative before the half, you're right. It was like looking a gift horse in the mouth, but we didn't even have a housing unit to roll it out. Myself, Mike, Jack, Leah Gazan, we stood up all night because we were also told if we didn't take it, we would lose it. Well, with no capacity almost to take it and roll it out, that's a huge risk. So I just really appreciate this discussion, and I know Councillor Edie wants to get in.
So lesson learned on that one is what I'd say. Now we've learned our lessons. So now what do we do? How are we going to be proactive on
And
that?
that's part of the reason, by the way, that I asked for the special dispensation on housing to go to FCM. Because for
Good.
us, that
That's
was a live issue, right? That program, the National Housing Strategy, was built on cities like Toronto that absolutely had employment income assistance and housing in the form of Ontario Works. We didn't. And so the struggles we had in getting it, you know, frankly, if we didn't have this conversation, probably would never be known, let alone rolling it out. And so let alone doing all of that during the pandemic and during a housing crisis. So it's not unimportant that our charter, which is open on the table, by the way, the provincial government, right? With all the bills and Plan 2050 and more. And we're getting these subtle hints from this government that they think that municipalities should have voluntary and more control over decisions that affect them. Well, homelessness affects us. So that's excellent language for Minister Bushy and others. But there is a lot more in terms of governance, constitutional talks that are to be had. You know, you might think it's a mistake to bypass the province. I do see it's a bit of an erosion of, you know, what we always held true of provincial federal relations and municipal relations. I think that there's a role for Indigenous governments in housing. I'd argue that Indigenous governments played more of a role last term in helping the city of Winnipeg in drawing down housing dollars from that national strategy than the province did last term. This term, I hope it's a whole new deal. But those issues for the city of Winnipeg and other municipalities like ours, still critical, and no one's probing those. So look, you know, this doesn't have to be borne by this agenda item, but that juxtaposition between permanent housing and the front end of the transitional encampments, you know, delicious in terms of probing that. Because the crux is really a rock and a hard place for a city like ours. Councillor Eby, you want to get in here? Yeah.
So, all right. Just, I hear about lived experience. So I lived on the streets in the same areas of the city where the problems are way huger. I lived out there as a 13-year-old, but since I've been elected, I think that I bring kind of a experiential perspective. So first I wanted to speak about, so a lot of this is about the addictions. And I actually voted against, the transfer of land for addiction housing and so on. And the only reason I voted against it is we were taking recreation property, which supposedly, and many people like Saul Burrows will tell you, the more involved you keep youth involved in recreation, the less chance they're going to end up with difficult futures. And at the same time, we want to talk about the province, and I pointed this out. This was in the second term. You hadn't been elected till 2018, Madam Chairperson. But I sat at the community services table there, and I pointed out that because it needed a huge renovation, the former, Kinsman Children's Hospital adjacent to the Maryland Bridge, on Wellington Crescent, heaven forbid, the province was unwilling to put the money in there to stabilize the riverbank. But there was a huge facility, provincial, that could have been used for addiction, or it could have been used for this kind of housing we're talking about. It would have been pretty big and would have required a lot of staffing in order for that low barrier housing to happen, and then so people can move to their future. So, I don't think we've spent enough time. I brought it up during that debate, and none of my fellow council members really wanted to talk about it because it became not in my backyard issue, right? Which would have been the same thing on Wellington Crescent, Madam Chairperson. Heaven forbid that. Anyway, But we build those facilities and we operate those facilities in my ward, in the north end. We do that. But the thing is, you have to bring people away, as we heard Marion and others say, we have to bring people away from participating in social interaction that continues to spur on one's addictions. We have to provide opportunities and so funding. Now, that said, now there are all these initiatives for affordable housing, like, yes, the Rapid Housing Initiative, it has its difficult consequences, but here we have 126 Alfred. Wonderful, renovated, costs a lot of money. The Indigenous people put other money in, renovated a place, and it is working really good for young Indigenous youth to move into living a better life, being able to take care of their families, trying to stay away from, the past trauma, whatever it is. Excellent facility. So the money ended up good at the city, public service level, and being able to apply or whatever and look at that. Yeah, very difficult. But I just want you to know, Madam Chairperson, you probably know Councillor Gilroy and I had moved it was Councillor Gilroy's motion and I seconded. We have downtown is having a ton of money pumped into it. And the province seems to want to pump money into it, although maybe it's too responsive and not proactive enough, but it is happening. Other levels of government are doing good things, like, for example, Tina's Place needed a 24/7 operation dollars. The city and the province wouldn't do it. They found the money from the federal government. So federal government is doing some good things, right? So, but we have a plan. Oh, okay. So what's happening with this amending motion, that's what the meeting with the mayor is about. And I'm talking about, and I heard my colleagues talk about further action that we need to take. Well, neighborhood revitalization, neighborhood renewal requires a multi-pronged approach, because the city is not, people don't want to live in some of these areas because it's dangerous. Crime, people with addictions, struggling. I heard a young kid say, a sketchy person passed out on the sidewalk. Well, let's say if we help that sketchy person, what is the other levels of government doing? We get them into this housing. Where is their future opportunity to be able to live a life of independent of, whatever you want to call it, but being able to go on with your life and do things. I was lucky enough in my life to have and build opportunity, right? I had something after blindness. We need to provide that. So this whole neighborhood revitalization, and it calls on Councillor Gilroy. We have the policy individual that Councillor Wyatt referred to is the support on this. And the idea is to move forward and speak to the various other level governments response, but also to talk to those community groups to say what's missing. And then we, the city, will have something to come back with. The idea is to come back with a report that the mayor and council, all 16 of us, can go and say, the city's willing to do this, but you, province, you, federal, you need to fill in these gaps. Yeah, you're doing something, but there's a lot more to deal with, right? And so I just wanted to make that statement. It's totally off base of this 1-year lease thing, but I just, this is an exemplary of, we're not dealing with the issue properly. So in that, Madam Chairperson, I've said my piece.
That to me sounds like a classic Canadian way of dealing with a new emerging crisis.
I just want to make quickly 5 or 6 points. First of all, in terms of the holistic approach that the Councillor Edie was referring to, there's no doubt that the city of Winnipeg de facto, just by our involvement in parks and recreation, has a huge role to play in terms of ensuring health and wellness of our citizens. I'll give you the example, Madam Chair, that somewhat well known, maybe not, after the end of the Vietnam War, preparing for the end of the Vietnam War, the American government was very concerned about all these soldiers returning home and having imbibed in heavy substance use in Vietnam. An experiment was conducted, famously now called the Rat Park experiment, where they had one group of rats in a container with lots of different distractions and things that they could do, and another group in another container with no distractions. And they had two fresh water, which was good, and water that was also had substances. Believe it or not, the one that had lots of healthy other activities ended up the rats did not imbibe in the substance water tainted material versus the other one. Soldiers came back, most of them were well. They did not go back to their previous habits as they were during the war. Points out to the fact that when we build good facilities, rec facilities, park facilities, pools, like we had a discussion with before, when we invest in those things, it actually makes for a healthy city de facto for many citizens, preventative in many ways, to Councillor Edie's point. Secondly, I just want to point out Councillor Schreier is absolutely correct. The federal government has set a precedent in this area now, and therefore we have a great precedent we can work on. The other point I'd like to make, to your point, Madam Chair, I was here prior to your arrival, when council decided, I think wrongly, to wind up the office that was opened under Glenn Murray, which was the single window for housing. I had the honor of working with David Stantz, an amazing individual, and that was wound down in the term of 2014 to 2018, where it was eliminated, and we've been struggling ever since. The next point I'd like just to make is to second to my last, which is to the credit of the previous mayor, he created the illicit drug task force. The recommendation report came down in June of 2019. I put it on my Facebook site on that day when the 5 years anniversary. You read the report, it had all of the solutions in it. Yet when I asked a member of the committee who was a citizen member appointed, why is it that when you read the report, there's not a who, what, when, where, and why? Who's going to implement what, when, where, and why? What level of government, timing, funding, so on? And his response to me was, Russ, that is what the levels of government wanted. No accountability. And so it still sits on a shelf, yet the report is amazing and the recommendations are there if we just implement it. Finally, a suggestion, Madam Chair, we have the ability as a committee, maybe the office of the mayor needs support this way. We have the ability, if we so choose, create a subcommittee of this committee that would work on developing public policy in this neighborhood to assist the city going forward on all of these fronts. That's just a suggestion. Maybe that's what is needed to kind of get the ball rolling here. I don't know, but I'm just putting that out there. And those are just some of my thoughts. Other than finally, a very good friend of mine who's passed on, who was a very senior public servant in the federal government for all of his life. Amazing man. Worked directly with Jim Carr, actually, back in 2018, told me how at one time after World War II, when they learned from World War I, they had to put a ton of programs in place, especially for all the soldiers coming back, that in the 1970s, all these programs were slowly cut. That were supports to basically ensure that people didn't fall through the cracks. And in the 70s, the federal government slowly cut these programs. And all of a sudden, in the 1980s, the thing started. It's called homelessness, out of the blue, forming in city after city. In other words, it's been done before and we can do it again. So those are just some thoughts. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Schreier, do you wish to move the recommendation of the public service after all is said and done? We have more to discuss, what to do. We'll regroup as a committee. Perhaps this is a great showcase of the energy the committee is going to have for some of these issues. So do you wish to move, Councillor Schreier?
Sure, so moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. We're going to look at number 10 now. Rescinding declaration of surplus for old exhibition arena, 80 Sinclair Street and St. Boniface East Community Center. We'll do a brief survey from the administration here on the report, and then Councillor Edie, I'll turn to you.
Yeah, 80 Sinclair Street,
I understand the whole.
you understand that one, Councillor Eby?
To move by me.
It was discovered that the original purchase agreement restricts our ability to sell the land. The city has since invested in the arena as part of the North District Police Station project, and it will be occupied by Community Services and its partners. And with respect to 1051 Brussels Avenue, which is the former St. Boniface East Community Center, that was declared surplus in 2003, but since then, the public service has determined that the property would be difficult to develop due to servicing constraints and its location, which is in an industrial area. The property can be used potentially for reforestation or naturalization, which could help with the city's commitment to add 1,000 acres of parkland.
Councillor Eby.
Yeah, the other issue with it was to subdivide the old X Arena. It's out on a property, but yeah, and just so everybody knows who gave the land to the city, the federal government gave it to it. This used to be the common grazing land back in the way back when, back actually before the city of Winnipeg became the city of Winnipeg, actually. So more than 150. So I understand it, and the report's pretty straightforward. So community service is going to occupy the old X Arena. It's got a lot of millions, thanks to actually a lot of work in EPC directing some other level of government dollars into the project, which I think is good. It will also house the Winnipeg Aboriginal Sport Achievement Center as well, and I think that's great. But I did have a question though. So is this report saying the building on the East St. Boniface, is it saying that it's not?
There's no building, there's no building.
There is no building, right? It's just empty property, right? So, okay. And I like this idea of reforestation and natural habitat, whatever. Anyway, okay.
Yeah, and this is more of a kind of a segue, I suppose. I recall back when I was an executive assistant to Councillor Boychuk back in the 90s, and we had an opportunity to do a tour of this entire industrial park, being the old St. Boniface Industrial Park. And I remember Terry Dugan, who was the chair of Public Works at the time, saying this is such a decrepit, ugly part of our city. and he's not wrong, and we sometimes don't like to point out, and yet it's so close to the heart of our city. And I've often thought about it, Madam Chair, that this would be a wonderful area to be able to do if we earmark resources, to do a full-on new precinct plan of repurposing brownfield sites. I point out, I recall, grew up on Albion Avenue when the former Shell refinery blew up, and it still sits there to this day as a massive brown field site in the middle of the city, and how there is so much land here that is being underutilized or underpurposed, which is fully serviced in many cases, that can be repurposed for the point of housing and beautification and connectivity in terms of transportation and so on in our city. And I just say that in light of the fact that this land is in that area. I hear you in terms of, I'm supportive of the report. And other than, I was surprised that we would have declared surplus land along La Jamoutier that we may have needed in the future, but Public Works obviously weighed in on it at the time, saying we didn't need it, knowing the growth and development on the east side of the city and the impact this is having directly on the existing 4 lanes of La Jamoutier being able to handle the ever increasing traffic volumes, including ever increasing trade and truck traffic volumes that take place in this area. So I'm happy to support it in light of the fact where we're sitting.
Okay,
Thank you.
did you wish to?
I'll move it.
Motion there?
Sure, I'll move it.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Carried unanimously. Extension of time, closing of public lane north 341 Scotia Street between Scotia Street and the Red River.
Yeah, I'll move it actually. It's still my word.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so I moved the extension. It's too bad it takes so long to get these, this is a piece of property right away or whatever. They used to run hoses there to pull water out. So the city, anyway, we don't do it that way anymore. Anyway,
Okay, Counselor Edie moves. All those in favor?
I,
Carried unanimously. Extension of time, proposed plan of subdivision. There's also an extension time of subdivision and rezoning south side of Jean Brébeuf. Did somebody want to move both of those items to be 11, 12 and 13? So moved by Counselor Schreier. All those in favor?
I,
Carried unanimously. Assignment of servicing agreement, 9 and 1 day. So moved by Counselor Wyatt. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Conditions of adding names to street name reserve list. This is the motion that comes to us from Assiniboine Community Committee recommending to the Standing Policy Committee that we don't include, that we include a condition to stipulate that community committees must not add names of sitting elected officials to the street name reserve list. I understand that there was a context for this that is somewhat important insofar as street names came forward with sitting officials. So this has come to us, Counselor Edie.
I just wanted to speak to it.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm okay with the change, but the reality is this precinct F, as it was developing, it was proposed that committee members' names, committee members' name, and Councillor Pactacan, bless his soul, just as soon as he heard it, that's not come into committee. He's going, what are you, crazy? Because we shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. That's crazy, right? Like,
Madam Chair,
What?
when I read this, I hear what, and I definitely do not support the idea of doing, adding elected officials' names who are still sitting the street name reserve list. At the same time, I do see where we've had in the past, members of council who have fallen ill, who are gone, who aren't coming back. And sometimes I just think there has to be common sense here applied. I don't know if we need a policy. I was suggesting we receive this information only because there may be a times where actually it is appropriate to do prior to their passing. It's often nice. I've often felt that it's nice to recognize people not posthumously, but when they're still with us. And we've had I've been on council in the past where we've had examples. I don't want to name the individuals because they're no longer with us, but where it is appropriate at that point. And if we have a policy, then all of a sudden we're hemmed in by the policy. I just think common sense has to be applied here, frankly.
well, I did, back in my first term, I did for a former councillor who was still alive, but not sitting, renamed a bridge.
Yes, I'm
Which
thinking of
is almost impossible to do now.
well, and I'm thinking of circumstances. I'm thinking of another councillor. We did name a facility off in the west end of Winnipeg, which would have been nice to have done when he was still with us.
A library, we renamed.
Well, no, I'm also thinking of another one who was wailed in the west end south of the Assiniboine, and it would have been nice to have done it for him while he was still with us in a lot. Anyway, that's why I just I see the both sides to this, and I just think it would be common sense. Maybe there's a way to do it, to write a policy to say, subject to extenuating circumstances, that of the recognized by the mayor's office or something. I don't know.
Can you say a sitting city council?
Well, that's what it does say.
But it says a sitting.
Sitting elected official.
Sitting, but
I'm
I'm
saying if they're still alive.
well, that's my point, I guess. But anyway, I don't know. I would send it to the administration, maybe they kind of take those comments into consideration, and then maybe they could come back with some thoughts.
What, how about, I mean, this is, the administration's here, we can hear from them now. The other thing too is we kick it to the next meeting. I'm inclined to receive this information and then look at it in its entirety. And if there's something else to be put back, I too looked at it when I read it and I thought, we already have conflict of interest. This touches that when you're sitting there and saying, well, I like Sherry Rollins as a street name. That sounds so wonderful to me. But we do have like our code that should prevent not adding names of sitting election officials, and I appreciate your conversation. Does the public service want to talk about this?
When I look at the motion, I think it goes beyond just civic officials. I think it's provincial, federal, school trustees, what have you. We were actually planning on amending the street name bylaw anyway. We've been looking at this for quite some time. So if it's committee's will to refer it for review and report back in 120 days, we can work with legal. Your nuanced comment on potentially someone who's terminally ill or whatever, we can certainly definitely look at some kind of wording to include in there.
And the difficulty, there's another scenario too, just if I may, Madam Chair, point out, and I ran into this where I have the opinion as well that you don't name until they step off. And this is another level of government. And so I did the naming, and then this person came back. Maybe went from being member of parliament for 27 years to being a sitting MLA and Minister of Conservation. And what am I going to do? Remove the name now? No. And in many ways, Madam Chair, your predecessor actually for the award was the one who spearheaded the street naming policy. I always felt actually it worked actually quite well when we didn't have all these rules and bylaws. We actually were able to do things fairly effectively. This common sense seemed to pervade us. Community committee does in many ways. Yeah, I mean, many community committees were actually very good, I thought. And I strived, being council for many years, Madam Chair, just my own personal policy of trying to name as many streets as possible after women, because I felt they were ignored for many years. As many streets as possible for people of different backgrounds who I felt were ignored. The one area that I regret that I'm trying to work on now is the Indigenous file, and more names that way for parks and roads and streets. But in terms of like our Asian community, people of color, all of that, people of different sexual orientation, I worked hard on that, and I just think I want to give more credit to my colleagues on council for having done that even before the bylaw came into effect. So, yeah.
I think that as an employing committee would be happy if we were to move a motion to refer this motion to the departmental review of the bylaw.
Sure.
I think that would
Come back in 180 days, I think it was.
Yeah.
180 or 120.
Like
180 would be great.
Like to
Not
move.
to involve legal.
That's right.
If we can bring it, if you could say up to, if we can get it back sooner, we
Later,
can
not that.
definitely do so.
So I'd like to make the point that as it's worded, it can be interpreted differently, that they would be interpreted reasonably, because the way it's interpreted, that means if someone has the same name, it can't be named after a person because it's the name of a sitting elected official. We would use the word named after a sitting elected official, and that would be clear. Having said that, I hope that's understood.
Understand.
I kind of think it wouldn't have to go to court or something like that to stop us naming after using the name of a sitting elected official, because it's not named after them. It's just using their name because it's somebody else who has the same name.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Wyatt, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Designated cannabis production facilities 2-year follow-up report. Does
I
someone
would
wish
move that
to-
we received as information.
Okay, any discussion?
I'm sorry, which one's?
The
Number
cannabis
16.
production facilities 2-year follow-up report.
Oh, yeah.
Just wanted
What
to-
we did seemed to work.
And
market
so
is
much
taken
had
care of.
happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, James Beach is here, but so moved by Councillor Wyatt. All those in favor?
Aye.
Carried unanimously. Winnipeg zoning bylaw, RMF standards for bicycle parking ratios.
Madam Chair, may I weigh in? I was the one who moved this at community committee actually.
Go ahead, Councillor,
Yeah,
introduce your motion.
Yeah, thank you. I moved this because only what I've been seeing after a number of public hearings now, and on also subdivisions, but also in terms of specifically RMF projects. And I somewhat monitor the other community committees and I appreciate the fact that in some parts of the city, cycling is a higher priority. But what I find frustrating is where we as a community committee are then the ones pushing to get more bicycle parking in a facility. when it should just be a standard citywide applied by the planning department across the board. That whether the building is going up on River or Stradbrook or going up on Peguis and Transcona, the bicycle parking, there should be storage facilities. There should be one-for-one parking, strive for it all the time. I'm at the community committee, just to give you an example, James, explaining to the developer and to the planning department to a certain extent that I lived in an apartment in Park City Commons where I was able to park my bike in front of my vehicles because all we had to do was put a metal ring into the cement pillar in the underground parking in front of the vehicle. All of a sudden you have one-for-one parking across the board, almost, and you could do it on a outside parking lot as well as the ground level. And I just really think there's got to be a way for us to ensure that the standard is across the city, that we are encouraging cycling with new projects coming forward, and that we're not making different recommendations at one end of the city, at one community committee versus another end of the city. And that's why I moved this motion, Madam Chair, to try to get us on the same page when it comes to recommendations from the public service. Because I'm constantly moving amendments to development agreements to have more bicycle parking provided. And most times the applicants are very amenable to it. I haven't run into one yet who's not amenable, actually. So I don't know why it's just something, we get so hung up on the vehicle parking, we don't spend enough time just ensuring that this is done, applied equally across the board as well. Those are my thoughts, and that's why I'm moving it.
So just, I'll come to you, Councilor Schreier. So just, you're interested in amending the development agreement parameters then?
Well, I want to, I don't, you know what, at this part, I'm open. I just want to make sure that whatever's happening in one part of the city, in one community, they're pushing for more bicycle parking. I don't mind doing it at community committee and ensuring a developer has more bicycle parking, bicycle storage, one-for-one. I just would like to see it also from the department saying, look at, this is, whether you've got an RMF project going up on Peguis or on Devonshire Drive West, or whether it's going up on River or Stradbrook or wherever in the city, the bicycle parking is, we're striving to get more bicycle parking everywhere. And that's automatically done. And if we do it via this, I'm fine with that. If it's a different form of a policy change, I don't know.
And then, okay.
Councilor Schreier want this?
Councilor Schreier said I'd come over to you.
Yeah. Well, I just have a question for Councilor Wyatt. If you applied the same ratio in those cases of which you speak, in which you say the developers were amenable, because I'm just wondering, to me, maybe it's more of a question of a margin rather than a specific ratio. As an example, we keep changing the parking ratio, a huge, a gigantic margin. As a matter of fact, and in this case, yeah, did you use the same margin in these cases? Maybe your own cases are an indication of a potential margin rather than a specific, very specific ratio. Because I get what you're saying. It's just in all these cases, there's always a margin and a notable one. And
Councilor Wyatt.
Yeah, what was interesting, just to give you context to this, Madam Chair, and to Councilor Schreier's point. This came out of actually a multiple family housing project that has been approved by council at the corner on Narren Avenue, Councilor Schreier's ward, at an old 7-Eleven. And on the north side of Narren, I forget the cross street there, Councilor Schreier. I think it was Stapleton or something. Anyway, they are building a 6-story, I think, structure with X amount of units, over 100. And they came forward at the plan approval stage now. And we are now working at the plan approval stage. We were able to find a way through the plan approval stage at our last community committee meeting to accommodate more bicycle parking, do a 1-for-1 ratio. The developer actively and positively worked with us on that. He was in the room. But it would have been nice to us in the event. We really didn't have a hammer in the situation. You know what I'm saying? We didn't have it through the zoning bylaw. We didn't have it through the agreement, where it's just automatically done, like we do other things automatically. And that's where I kind of started thinking about it, why I moved this motion to come to this committee for consideration. And we were lucky in that sense, and Councilor Charles Wood, the applicant, the developer was there and was prepared to work with us successfully on accommodating the bicycle parking. So, because at that point, he had over 100 units, but only 20 bicycles stalled in his whole building.
Counselor Edie on, question on the motion. I suppose.
I mean, it's asking for the administration to come back with
Some thoughts, sure.
with some recommendations. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Chairperson, but I think there are some provisions for bicycle parking. I don't know that there's any set ratio, but
whether it's set ratio, I would just refer to the administration to consider.
Yeah, well, and I just want to point out something else, Councillor Wyatt, as you know, like, I don't know if it goes in the development agreement, the zoning bylaw gives you parking ratios, and then if they want to vary it, they go to different, whatever. The thing is, indoor bicycle parking is better than outdoor because you're leaving your bike outside exposed to theft, right? So there's that issue as well. I just point out, because I love your underground parking idea, which is secure, right? Or more secure. But Madam Chairperson, we have on November 19th, hearings about just giving a right to build stuff, right? And it's mostly related to large multifamily installations. So it's not going to come to committee where councillors can review and recommend more parking or bicycle parking or whatever. So I think it's really important, really, that this get considered and how you would implement this so it takes care of what the new zoning life will be, because a lot of this stuff will be left to the administration only under building permits and stuff like that. So
I think James Beach has joined us at the table. I would like to hear from him just briefly on the motion. And there's a broader context that I think, thank goodness you guys are all here and want to make changes on these bylaws, because that's what we're going to be doing for 2 years if you want to stick with it. James Beach.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Here for the long haul with you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, councilors. We appreciate the motion, and it's something we've already been moving the bar on, is bicycle parking. And Councillor Edie is correct. In the new malls and corridors PDO, we're suggesting, if approved by council, 1 lockable bicycle parking space per every 2 dwelling units. So we're getting even closer to Councillor Wyatt's thoughts.
50% ratio.
Yeah, currently in the zoning bylaw, it is regulated, and it's 1 lockable bicycle space per 10 parking spaces. So in the malls and corridors bylaw, we're putting right up to 1 bicycle parking for 2 units. So this idea.
You've already won, Councillor Wyatt, is what he's saying, almost.
1 to 10 on everything else, though, is.
Yes, 1 to 10 on everything else, but in malls and corridors PDO, 1 to 2. And then the 1 to 1 has merit. And we would definitely be open to looking at that, but I would recommend it be as part of the overall zoning bylaw rewrite. So we can do the research, sure. We can talk to the stakeholders, we can look at other cities and do it properly.
Does that take a change in motion?
No, there's no report back here. There's no timeline here.
We've already committed to the timeline on doing the whole kit and caboodle. And so you would just simply be referring it, you'd just pass it essentially, because that's what I thought you all signed up for, the 2-year run to make the next generation change in the zoning bylaw.
No, we had no idea.
No, I thought that's what every time
we want to be on the committee with you.
Got excited. I thought that you guys all had your hand up to do the major overhaul, and was enthused. And so motions like this have a deadline, and James Beach is on it. So I would say the Loris.
I think I have a pertinent question though.
Oh, yeah, exciting.
Just from our administration, because they clearly looked at it, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I don't think that it's undue hardship or whatever on a developer to install a bike rack. As Councillor Wyatt has suggested, you could, for every parking spot you have, but just, I guess it would be in the language, right? Because often we vary the parking. So if you go 1-to-1 and you have 1-to-1 parking, you know, that's cool.
But let them study it, let them.
No, I'm just asking the question if they can.
Back to Florida, Councillor.
Sorry, Councillor.
Was there consideration, is it one per parking space or is it one per unit?
To be clear. I think the motion is written, if I may.
In defense of your motion, and then I think the question was also to
I'm
the
just
Board of
asking
Service.
administration
Yeah.
when they looked at it,
Mhm.
are they saying it's one bike thing for every parking spot
When they
or
looked
one
at-
for or one for every 2 units of thing or one for every 2 parking spaces?
Yeah, in malls and corridors, Counselor, it's based on units, and in the zoning bylaw, it's based on units. It's not based on parking stalls because
Actually, James, right now in the current adopted Winnipeg zoning bylaw, it's based on parking spaces.
Right.
But in the malls and corridors draft PDO for council consideration, it's based on units.
yes, and the motion was based on units. So that's how we would look at it.
If I may, Madam Chair, I'll move referral to the full zoning bylaw review for consideration. And I'd just like to add that I sat on this committee for 11 years previously, and I was very excited back then to hear from the former acting CAO or acting director at the time, Mr. Joshi, that he was going to get back to us after the 2010 election with the review of the bylaw review that we had done in 2006 when Peter Schmidt was the chair, but then it never materialized. So I'm extremely happy to hear that we are doing this now. And just out of curiosity, just for information, would you be able to enlighten us on the timeframes that we're looking at for the review of 6,500 or 6,400, I should say, which we were promised back in 2010 by a previous amendment?
Sure. So, Madam Chair, through you to the council, we, per last August's Clarion report, which points out what should be changed about the current Winnipeg zoning bylaw and the downtown zoning bylaw. The Housing Accelerator Fund has that as one of its targets to be in contract with a consultant by December 15 of 2025.
Okay.
In order to start the full zoning bylaw rewrite. And our internal target is to hopefully have something ready for council consideration by the end of December 2027.
To the point that's being made, thank you for that information. I would encourage the department to consider looking at the process that was initiated back when it was done previously. I want to give a lot of credit to the department then and to the former chair, Peter Schmidt. I recall extensive meetings of us having with major stakeholders at the convention center with all members of council participating, including the mayor, around big round tables. We had lots of mapping, specific mapping, every councilor's ward. It was a very extensive process. It updated and modernized the bylaw in a way which we hadn't done for a long time, but it included a major, genuine, I'll put it that way, consultation piece where folks who were engaged, especially those who are constantly making applications to the city of Winnipeg. Just FYI.
Was there a draft of a zoning bylaw that came out of that initiative?
We approved it, and then there was an automatic trigger within the zoning bylaw that a review would be done within X amount of years, which never followed up. And that was why I raised the question with the previous acting director back prior to the 2010 election. That would be after that. And anyway, long story short.
Yes, so long story short is all of us must get reelected in order to to see this day, but the chunk of change that we're doing this term is so critical in getting you to feel, I guess, super satisfied in your career that you did see a zoning rewrite in your time again. So really good discussion. That was a referral. I think we passed it, or do I have to call the question? Let's do that again.
let's call the question.
Can I just clarify really quickly with the public service? The wording that I have is that the recommendation of the community committee be referred to the public service for consideration as part of, I have future changes to the Winnipeg zoning bylaw, but I'm not sure that really.
We typically say the comprehensive zoning bylaw review.
Okay.
And could I just, before you call the question, Madam Chair, just get one more comment, which is there any way to informally discuss with staff in terms of until that time, because we're now talking about 2 or 3 years away, that they could apply a unison standard encouraging as much bicycle parking as possible at the application stage, especially when it comes to RMF applications coming forward presently, if possible. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Confirmed.
All those in favor?
All right.
Carried.
Councilor Wyatt.
Councilor Wyatt's motion, Councilor Wyatt. Yeah, perfect. Last item, 18 subdivision and rezoning 199 Park Street.
Very straightforward. I move approval, Madam Chair.
All those in favor?
All right.
Carried unanimously. We'll now move into motion.
So move, Madam Chair.
Councilor Wyatt.
All right.
That's in accordance with section 3C and
Unanimously. Yeah. All right, thank you. We're back from in-camera session and we're gonna need a motion for adjournment. So moved by Councilor Edie. All those in favor?
Aye.
That's carried unanimously. Thanks so much.
Can we get a photo of the committee, Madam Chair?
Absolutely.